Welcome to Spy Satellites, a podcast about Dune, Imperium, and the people who play it. I'm your host, CJ, and this is Rotation 9, where we're reviewing Dune, Imperium Uprising. So join us, why don't you, for a roundtable discussion focusing on cards, combos, atomics, and everything spice. If you like what we do, please give us a like and subscribe, and if you'd like to support us, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/hiddenassets. Supporting us helps us continue to produce quality content and gives you access to some pretty awesome perks, including voting for the upcoming podcast topic. So tell your friends and let us know how we're doing. We're always trying to improve the quality of our content, and we can't do it without you, the listener. So today, orbiting Arrakis with me is our tournament maestro, Black Shadow. Welcome back, Black Shadow.
Yeah, howdy all. Hope you're keeping fairly well. No minor topic today. With our full review of Uprising. So no pressure on us.
That's right.
Whatsoever. We have obviously had a bit of time to play around with Uprising now. Obviously from our jaunt to North Carolina, as well as our own time of playing the game. CJ's got a physical copy of the game now. I don't know if it's available over here physically yet. I've not had a chance to.
It should be. Asmodee does distribute in Europe.
It's starting to creep out around other places in the world. There were some delays in Europe with the shipping, I believe it was. But that's not giving me the opportunity. You know, I've had plenty of chance to have a crack at this. So we figured after our vote with the Landshire Council, huge thanks to everyone supporting us on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are here to give you our full review of Dune Uprising, which is no small feat, as I'm sure you indicated by the length of time of this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the ones where, like, if you want something that's going to go real into the weeds on this, then I do welcome you to Hidden Assets Safari Tour. However, we've also got some surmise for you coming up. So if you're interested in more brief, we'll get to that in a moment.
Yep. So we will have some timestamps below. So if you want to skip ahead to different sections where you're interested in, please feel free to do so. So let's just get right into it, though, like our overview of Dune Imperium Uprising. And, Black Shadow, why don't you start?
So, yes, Uprising. Where to begin with this? Let's go from the very top up. This is a good game. I mean, this is a very good game. I think there is no debate about that. That I do wonder occasionally if that's maybe the questions being asked. I've done a lot of sampling and a lot of kind of looking around in the build up to this, kind of gauging people's thoughts, reviews, comments. I've looked at other people's reviews to kind of base off of. And there is a question I do find that comes up a lot for Uprising. And I think it's a pretty valid question. If I have the base Dune Imperium game, do I need this one? I think it's a lot more of a difficult question to answer than it looks on the face of it. But a lot of people ask this. A lot of people indeed did ask this when Uprising was first announced a couple of months or so ago. I think it's fair to note that maybe the initial announcement for it, there was a bit of perhaps muddled messaging at the time. Obviously, people wondering, is this a standalone expansion? Is it its own thing? Is another addition to that? Some people, it wasn't the most clear what was going on. And I think it's fair to note that there was some confusion at the time. I don't think it's a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but I don't want to ignore that that's been the case. It's also difficult, I think, for this game, because there's also a question of legacy. In the fact that Base Dune Imperium is a really good game. And it's still a really good game. It has, obviously, expansions, Savfk, Immortality, which definitely, I think, helped kind of smooth out some of the indifferences. I think, largely speaking, it was better for the product than worse on it. But, like, Base Dune Imperium on its own is still really good and really enjoyable. That's something that has been kind of made reminded to us with the release of Dune Imperium Digital, of course. That is just base Dune Imperium, and playing that has been refreshing and enjoyable and reminds you of kind of like sometimes you don't need loads of crazy gimmicks for something to be interesting and enjoyable. Just good solid mechanics, fun into play is pretty good. And that bears with that.
So that's a really good point. Like, actually, I'm playing a lot of base game, and I've just been really content with that. They've got the challenges in there, I think they're called, and you can kind of do these little mini games where you play against AI with specific tweaked rules. Some of those seem to have been pulled from our Canleys, so that was pretty cool.
I make no official comment on that.
But I think that overall, like, so before we get into like the nitty gritty, I think like the base uh, framing of Dune Imperium, base game, EXMO, Uprising, that base framing, deck building, worker placement, conflict at the end of the round, that tension and the race to 10 points is a winning combination. I think it's just a really phenomenal set of mechanisms that come together really well with this package. And I love the theme, of course. You know, I'm a big Dune fan, so it obviously comes together very well for me. And so, I mean, I just give this. I think Uprising is just a stellar product, and so that doesn't mean I don't have some issues with it, but I think that I have issues with everything. So that's just a me thing. But
you're just a bit, you know, you want the best for it. I can understand that. You know, you've been around this sort of thing a lot more than me, and that's kind of where I'd want to point there is a bit of difference to myself and CJ here. CJ's been around board games a lot more than I have. From on my part, like this is kind of the only thing I've ever played kind of like this is Dune Imperium, whereas you've got a lot more familiarity with a lot more of the wider concepts. So we do have kind of different opinions going into this, which I think is good because it's different. You know, not everyone knows everything, and I make no suggestion whatsoever that I'm like a maestro of board gaming knowledge. Far from it. So I'm hoping that perhaps that complements itself. But yeah, it's just the one thing I want to bring up with Uprising. You know, I do think that there's a, you know, I can understand maybe people ask the question about like if I've got the base game, do I want this one? But it's difficult because like obviously we can compare it to base Dune Imperium, but it's also a very different product. There's a lot of under the hood changes that go into this that make this very kind of different in its exact focus and the kind of things you're going for and what it intends to do. Even if the basic framing of the game and its general structure and its mechanics are basically the same, there's a lot of actual differences to the point where I think the two are actually surprisingly different products.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that's a really good metaphor. I think it's kind of like having two of the same car with different engines. A lot of that's a really good way of putting it. This one feels almost like, you know, if Ix and Immo were kind of like bolted on turbochargers to base game, then this is just a bigger engine, I'd say. Like this is just a bigger engine. And so there's a lot more going on in Uprising that is interesting, that gives you more room to play, that is more variable. And so I think that has a lot of things going for it. I think it's got just more stuff, and it has more flexibility, and especially for those of you out there who are listening who are competitive players who play in the community online, then you're probably pretty excited about Uprising, namely because it gives you more freedom of doing specific cool things like spies. We'll get to that in a bit. One of the coolest things that they've added to this game, flat out. I think it's one of the best mechanisms. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Yeah, it gives you creativity in play because you can place spies wherever you want, but you know that allows you to either make cool plays later on or future planning for future rounds.
Yeah.
You know, devious plays to steal alliances. It has so many cool rewards and takeaways that that I think a lot of competitive players are going to really enjoy.
Yeah, I do agree. I think I'll say like I don't necessarily think it's the most like it's kind of weird. I do think it's the best. We'll get into more detail of the spies in a moment. It's probably the most enjoyable I think addition to it. It may not be the most like important change in a way. But I would say like I do think pound for pound, Uprising. It's there's more going on with Uprising than say base Dune Imperium. I have to kind of try to compare it to base Dune Imperium rather than that and its expansions, because I do think once you have the expansions, which you know, yeah, bit turbochargers, bit kind of like patches of the base game and tweaking it, that kind of takes it into its own direction a bit. I do think Uprising and base Dune Imperium are probably its closest neighbors. And like this definitely like has more going on for it, you know, per moment. It's almost like this is like if you took Dune Imperium in an alternate universe And this has already got its first expansion with worms added in and added into Hanger Basin. That's kind of what
Yeah.
Uprising feels to me. It's like it's already got that first expansion bolted into it and already hard integrated into it. And that's not a bad thing at all. I think that shows kind of where the game is and the creativity that's been enabled in this. And definitely, yeah, there's a lot more going on for it. And I think overall it's a better product. But again, it's like I can understand people have like say, well, I've owned Dune Imperium for 3 years. Do I really need Uprising? Because it is kind of the same, but it's kind of not. And hopefully, this is a question that we'll be able to answer for you guys as we go through
Yeah.
this.
And I mean, this is kind of like what Direwolf does is they kind of iterate on existing properties. So like Clank, Clank has like three or four different versions. There's like the legacy version, there's base Clank, there's Clank in space. And then they have like, expansions for each of those. So there's all sorts of different things, just kind of like, play how you want sort of style. Like, do you like this theme better? Do you like that theme better? Like, do you like giant worms? Then this one's better for you. Do you prefer more of a slower, maybe more straightforward gameplay? Maybe base Imperium is better for you. They are very similar in a lot of ways. And so I can't answer that question whether you should buy one or the other. For me, I own both because I like Dune. I think there's only one Dune game that I don't own, and I think it's like House Secrets. Like that game, I'm not really interested in like more social deduction, but for me, I like have every Dune game, and I actually had the like dumbed down version of the Gale Force 9 big game, which I resold because I was like, I can't find a reason why I would play this game over Dune Imperium. Like it's just a better 4-player game. So like, I mean, I've gone through all of the different Dune games, and so like for me, I have 2 games that I play that are Dune now. It's like the big Dune game, and then I have Uprising. Then I play the digital version, of course, of Dune Imperium, because I just think like sometimes I just want to play that and chill, and it's really peaceful. The sound effects are so great. Like, and it's the bar of entry is so low. You just jump in there, and you don't have to worry about TTS mistakes or things like that. You can just get into the game and play. I'm getting off topic to Dune Imperium.
Yes,
I
love
love that.
didn't want to interrupt you. You were going off on a tangent. I was
apologize.
Like, let him rock and roll. The guy likes his love. He likes his
But
works.
I really do love digital. I think digital is great. I've run into a couple of bugs that are hilarious, like one which didn't let us finish a game. I just want to point that out, put that out there. There was a game that we were playing 4-player, and it was a really tight game, and everyone was like really bummed out. But at one point, someone started roping, basically like timing out, and then it went to the next player, and then they timed out, and then went to the next player, and they all timed out, and they're like, "We're still here. What's going on?" So everyone just consecutively was timing out over and over again, and we couldn't actually end the round. It was pretty funny. Yeah, but anyway, like besides that, and it's early access, of course, the implementation is great. I personally think Uprising, for me, I don't know if I'm going to go back to playing Ix and Immo anytime soon. I might, like 3 or 4 years down the road, and go like, let's revisit this, or maybe a year down the road. But right now, like there's so much to grab onto and unpack about Uprising that I think overall it just is a more exciting thing. But I think it also there's something to be said for its appeal to the competitive groups out there versus just a straight up casual play. I have taught this game to a couple casual players now, and they have enjoyed it. But I think that it's harder to grok than Dune Imperium base game or with Ix. Even Ix is a little bit harder because there's more. You can't really evaluate first time you're playing how good the shipping track is unless someone says you should do shipping. And in this way, I think it's similar to Ix because you kind of like have the worm factor, and you go like, well, worms are good. You should do worms, but that comes with all sorts of interesting nuance of choice and order and who's going to get what. And it's a little harder to predict than shipping in Ix, where you can go like, okay, second player's going to get shipping if they do this, or third player will if they don't get this. So that, kind of dynamic exists, but it's a little more complicated. So if you're a casual player, this is going to be my bottom line for whether you should buy Uprising or stick with base game. If you're a casual player and you play this like, once a month, I think maybe like you'd be better off with base game, honestly. If you play this game every week, and your group loves it, and your group is a big fan of like base game with Immortality or Ix or whatever, you've been playing that for a long time, I think, Uprising is a good product and you should pick that up. Because I mean, those of you who are playing this game competitively, this is kind of a lifestyle game for you, maybe. It is kind of for me. And so like in that case, stick with the lifestyle. That's my opinion.
Just I actually differ here. Which I didn't actually expect to happen, but I kind of do. Like if someone asked me who had never played like any, this is where it gets sort of tricky, and this is something that I think that has been a slight difficulty, and I have been noticing like looking through the rules and such, and I think this is notable with there has been an attempt with the developers for this to obviously try and give a quote easier way unquote to play the game, like without using like the churro modules, for example, which just gonna say it right now, don't just play the
Just
churro
use
modules. It's
them.
not that
That is
complicated. Just use them. They're a good part of the game. Not having them doesn't really make the game any simpler. I understand why it's there and I get it, but you should just play it every single game.
It's really
like,
funny.
If your first game, just
play
it.
Yeah, that is one of the funniest things about the rulebook, when they give you this very simple thing to add to the game, whereas like there are all these other more complicated things in the game, and if it's like, but it's like saying, all right, I want you to learn how to run hurdles and track, but now I want you to do it with a different shirt. That's not that different. That's nothing different. Yeah. It's like it doesn't matter. It's like just add these things in.
Super I get easy. Why they did it, and I don't want us to be like, this goes out live, and then 15 minutes later, pull down a message saying, we can't be friends anymore. I'm not trying to induce that. It's just that I understand what you're going for there, but it should probably just be like part of the base game, and just bolted in, hard iron. It's a very minor thing. Like, I'm not going to use that as a stick to beat with, but it is something. It's something I've noticed. That, I do think there has been a little bit of slightly muddled messaging, I think, with Uprising, which has slightly played it for its release. And again, this was notable when it first came out, and there was a lot of BGG threads. People kind of with questions, what exactly is going on? Why should they? And it's just slightly emblematic. I think it wasn't the most polished release for this. Now that's not to take away from the game. I still think the game's really good, but it's kind of like a slight kind of recipe in that stew. That wasn't what I was going to talk about, though. There was something else I was going to mention, and I can't be.
Well, but before you move on, can I comment on the
yeah, please do
the release?
Please do.
So yeah, I think I agree with you that I think that there was a little bit of mixed messaging, because everyone expected this to be an expansion, because it's called Dune Imperium Uprising, which sounds like an expansion, and that's what's weird about it. But it isn't. Like it's standalone. It does kind of, yeah. But it's that kind of, and people online are like, this sounded like an expansion. Is an expansion, and there's like dozens of these BGG threads that have now been answered hundreds of times, I'm sure, and it's a little weird. But then people are a little reactionary online, and I think that. Nothing. It's easy to be mistaken online and take this a different way, but obviously it's it did have a bit of a reaction that I wasn't surprised. I was a little surprised with. I honestly, even after the designers posted on Direwolf Digital and explained everything, but not everybody checks that every day, and like I do. So it's
I think the lessons were learned, and we can call it that. I think it wasn't the prettiest. That's the way it goes. And again, the thing is, one of the reasons that happened is because Dune Imperium itself is revered very, very highly. A lot of people still enjoy playing it. It's played tons. It's still top 10 on BGG, and the internet's never lied about anything. So that's gotta count for something. But base Dune is really, really good, which is why people ask us saying, well, is this does this make what I've owned for 2-3 years completely redundant? Short answer from me, not necessarily. But like the point I was trying to make originally, if there was someone who had like never played Dune Imperium before and was interested in getting hold of one of the games, personally, I would actually just tell them to get straight into Uprising. It is a little bit more complicated than base Dune Imperium. I'm not going to say that's not the case, but I don't think it's that much more. You know, I think part of the Uprising is a lot of kind of subtle nuances to the game, which maybe Ix doesn't in the way it kind of operates. Obviously, you've got like the spy mechanics. Yes, that's definitely tricky to get hold of and to make good use out of. You know, the worms, and obviously that makes a big change to the game. We'll get into that in a moment. But honestly, I don't think it's that much more complicated than Ix. And if someone's like completely blank slate, I would probably just get them straight onto Uprising, personally speaking.
Oh,
Does
okay.
that mean that, in my opinion, base Dune is redundant? No. I think they're two different ways of consuming the product, I guess. But that's just how I see it personally. And I know I talked about I talked about before this even got announced about Dune Imperium 2.0, and it was a natural progression for the game. You couldn't add anything else into Dune Imperium with the expansions, and that was definitely the case. And this wasn't a million miles away from what I was thinking about. So, yeah, I'm definitely happy to see this. And admittedly, there's been some things that I wasn't sure about going in, but I think I feel a lot better now having actually tried them. But yeah, to me, I think if you haven't got any, I would probably just say get Uprising. If you're gonna enjoy Base Dune Imperium, you're gonna probably enjoy this as well. If you've already got Base Dune Imperium, should you get Uprising? I think that's a little bit of a trickier question to answer. I think it depends, obviously, on how often you think you're going to use it, how often like your group might well play it. It might well be that perhaps you decide to find a way to give it a try first somewhere before making that decision. I can understand that, but I would say if it's blank slate, I would probably personally, if you're going to grab one, grab Uprising. There's a
That's
little bit
interesting.
more going on, but I do think you'll be better off for it in the long run. And this is where a lot of the focus is going to be for development at this point. I think
Yeah.
that is my assessment of it, and obviously that's different opinion to you, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean that's totally cool. I mean, yeah, from my perspective, I think that Uprising has more hard to evaluate pieces from a strategy perspective, which I think makes it a little harder to teach newer players. Not that if you have gamer friends who play heavier games, like I don't
Yes,
know,
this is an important
like
distinction
big,
to make. Yeah,
yeah. If
I
you're
do
like,
agree.
into big heavier games, or if you're even into middleweight games, like you play a lot of I don't know, Castles. Well, maybe Castles of Burgundy is a good example. It's kind of a medium weight game, or like Great Western Trail, even, or like Brass or something like that. If they're probably going to be able to pick this up really quick. But if you're looking at maybe a lighter medium player, someone who you want to introduce to more medium games, I think I'd stick with Immortality or a base game, and maybe add Ix later on or something like that as you grow into the game. So that's my
And
thoughts.
neither option is bad. That's the thing we're
No,
trying to
no,
make
they're
here.
all good.
Neither option is. There's no right or wrong answer here. But maybe the problem is that there are folks that want there to be a right or wrong answer, sort of thing, because that makes it very easy to distinguish and categorize. And I think the truth is, it's not quite that simple, which maybe isn't a good thing. I don't know. It's your mileage is going to vary.
Yeah.
Anyways, we should probably get into
Yep.
some more detailed mechanics here.
All right. Well, let's go through some of the things that we really like about Uprising. And let me kick it off. I'd like to actually start with explaining what the spy mechanism is. We didn't really talk about it, because it
Yes.
is my favorite thing about Uprising. It is, I think, a lot of people's favorite things. I've talked to a lot of players, and they just say this is the best part. So spies are a new addition to Dune Imperium, and what this is you have three little tokens, little cylinders that you may use, and certain cards will give you the ability to place a spy. And the spies go on these little outposts. They're like I can't remember what they're called. I think they're called outposts or observation posts. That's the term.
That's the one, yes.
Yeah, they're observation posts. They go on these observation posts, which are between two different agent locations on the board. And they always connect to or one location, actually. I think that Imperial Basin is only, the desert spaces are only one. But then what you can do when you have an agent, have a spy on that space, is if you go to a location that is connected, you can pull back your spy back to your supply, and recalling, it's called, and you can draw a card. Very simply, you get extra cards. Or if that space you wanted was occupied, you can also go there, that you couldn't normally go there, by pulling back your spy, by recalling your spy. It lets you, quote unquote, infiltrate that space and now you have access to that space. So very flexible mechanism that gives you access to things that you might not otherwise be able to get to. Kind of fills in that role that Helena Riches did in base game, and also the infiltration cycle of cards in Ix and Immortality. A bunch of cards that let you go spaces you wouldn't otherwise be able to go. There are also no intrigue cards that let you infiltrate because these are covered by spies. So it lets them kind of like condense a lot of these other mechanisms down into, and kind of like say, we don't need those in this portion of the game. Let's get rid of those and let's put other things in. So it frees up a lot of design space and also broadens the decision space. So that's one of the reasons I really like spies. So did you have anything to say about those, or?
Oh yeah, tons. I mean,
sure.
yeah, definitely. I do agree. Yeah, spies. There's been some fun introductions to this game. Some that maybe have more of an impact in a way the game works. But spies is definitely, I think, the most enjoyable thing to have been added to it, and I'm really grateful for it. And a variety of reasons there is for that, as we've talked about. Like, it definitely does. It adds a lot of extra dynamism to the board. I think one of the criticisms that players occasionally had in sort of base game is that you get into a situation sometimes where you just have like a random draw of cards, and obviously you've got things that, oh, I want to kind of get to Highliner, or I want to get to this particular space, for example, and out of you just draw 5 cards, you just don't draw it. And it's critical round, it's round 7, it's a big conflict, and you don't draw that access. You're like, oh, great. Well, I don't draw it, so that dude's going to go there instead, and that's it. What do I do? Stuff like that. And that feels pretty bad. What Spies is allowing, it's almost like a safety net in a way, so that if you don't draw that access immediately, you can still get it. You can find ways to kind of shift your strategy on the fly and say, all right, okay, well, I've missed that, but I can still go to Espionage, for example, and try and draw some cards, or I can go to Arakeen or whatever else, and I can try and find that access so I can still get there later on. It's not like I just didn't draw it, that's it, I just don't go there this round, which is obviously part of Euro games, and that's obviously that's part of the mechanics. It's who gets there first, use that action, locks out for the rest of them. But I think the game is better for it, that it allows the opportunity for people to kind of almost have a second chance in a way, because we see it all the time in competitions. I mean, even like in our current XMO tournament, for example, when someone misses out on that round of shipping because they just didn't draw the access, like, that's pretty big, and it feels terrible. And it's not a good place to be. So I think it definitely makes just a better experience. That's it. But even like outside of it, there's so much extra stuff going on. I think in effect, because you can use it for infiltration for like faction spaces as well, it makes alliances a lot less certain in a way. You went to like base Dune Imperium, for example. Like, if you get to you go to both faction spaces and you get an alliance because of it, it's so hard for anyone else to catch you. But outside of Intrigues, because they just can't hit those spaces themselves. Well, now you can. All right, you can go Espionage and you can go there, but then someone else can go there because they've already got a spy there. And then maybe someone plays like Distraction, so they can put a spy in that spot, and then they can go there. And suddenly you've got multiple people using the same space. So there's a lot less sort of shutting out of players. Again, I think it's better. It makes just a better, more dynamic board situation. And you're less worried about, oh, I absolutely have to go there first. People can kind of play a little bit more their own strategies and their own tactics as they go, which I think is probably better for the experience.
That's a good point. I think that the way that spies add to board variability is really interesting. And it's also it's also interesting that you can use them strategically as defensive units. Basically, if you want to keep your alliance, but you really want that card draw, you might just leave your spy there to keep somebody from infiltrating a space, so you can block up those spaces. So there's some really cool plays, very, very kind of mean plays. It feels like you're like, dang, if only that spy wasn't there, I'd be able to get that. Yeah, I've been run into that a lot. I've run into that situation quite a lot in this game. But I mean, that's really cool. That creates nice tension. It creates good drama and stories that you can tell about the game you just played. Like, somebody did that.
And
yeah.
It allows for a more opportunity to have like a player or like a longer term strategy on the board. I think a lot of Dune Imperium has been kind of, it's more about like people's tactics as they go, and kind of like going kind of round to round. Maybe obviously thinking like maybe a round or two ahead, sort of. But it's kind of difficult to kind of craft a strategy that kind of goes all the entire game. because of, well, one bad draw, for example. You don't get to a space you want to get to, and it all kind of falls apart. Now you don't have to worry about that so much, because you have that spy and you've got that quote guaranteed access unquote. It allows players to kind of craft out their game a lot more further into the future, which I think allows just generally for a lot more kind of creative thinking, a lot more skill expression, and for people, again, it's just, you just don't want people being bummed out of like, oh, I need to get the space, I just didn't draw it, okay, he's gone ahead of me, well, now what do I do? And you get from people trying to like make the best out of a bad situation. So like, okay, well, I've got this option and I know I've got that safe, but maybe I could go there first and do something there and then return to that. And people have suddenly feels like a much bigger wealth of opportunity to them on the table. I think this is complemented by other features in the game, like the contract, stuff like that. Obviously, we'll get to that as we go. But it just feels like a more kind of pleasant experience, I think, for people generally playing the game, because you just feel a lot less restrictive. And it's kind of a way around that as well, because you think as well, like at the very start of the game, there's not a lot of spaces to go to if you think about it. I mean, you think kind of obviously research expensive. You've got more spaces now that are bounded by influence requirements. Obviously, there's no Mentat. Deep Desert is a hefty water requirement, so people are not going to be getting to that very often. And so spies can kind of mitigate that so that if you are kind of struggling with resources or influence, whatever reason, you can still use spies to guarantee you access spaces. Why, like Margot, for example, is very strong because she can just whack down these spies on the city spaces. So she's always got that kind of out. If people just rush city spaces, she can still get there, and she's got that kind of fallback position. So I think that has obviously definite strategic value. But I just think from a player perspective, it just feels a bit nicer and a bit kind of like a way of getting out of certain restrictions. And that feels pretty good.
So this is maybe a good time to shift our gears. I think we've said enough about spies, really. The only thing I wanted to mention
I was going to say one last thing quickly. I know you mentioned about it. The option to recall spies for card draw. That's really good. And I think it's a really nice touch that so they're not stuck there. And also, card draw's big. And drawing the extra card, like that feels pretty good, and that can do a lot of good stuff. So I just want to make mention. I think it's still people are still sussing out when exactly to do it and when not to do it. But like getting the extra card draw, for example, like an Arakeen or something like that, or accept contract and getting that double card draw for a weak card and letting that enable the rest of your deck, I do think is a really cool touch. I just want to make carry on.
No, 100%. There are a lot more. Speaking of which, I wanted to talk about like the diversity of spaces and access, because the board itself is dramatically different than it was before. Not dramatically in that it's completely different,
isn't it? It's kind of weird.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of new spaces that are restricted, as you mentioned. So in addition to the Fremen Siege Tabor space that was basically like restricted to, you have to have 2 Fremen influence. Now there's 2 other spaces. There is the shipping space, which kind of replaced the Ix interstellar shipping. In my mind, I think it's just a better way to implement that. And I like that a lot. I really like this space a lot. It's actually one of the more I play the game, I find that this is one of the more higher level like spaces when you have to like understand when to hit that, when to get access to hit that. It's very important. And the next one is the new Mentat space, which is Imperial Privilege, which costs 3 Solari now. But not only does it recall an agent instead of giving you an extra agent for the round, it gets you the ability to trash an intrigue card and draw a new one. That ability is pretty massive. And the card draw, of course, is nice too. So there's 3 spaces on the board now. Let's just not forget that there's Deep Desert, you mentioned, that has a 3 water requirement,
which is pretty hefty.
So essentially from the beginning of the game, you have 4 spaces that are locked out to you.
And research station you're not getting to a lot of the time either.
And there's research station for 2 water. There's also of course Highliner and the Sardaukar, which was the Conspire space, slightly different but basically the same thing. Those are all locked away too. So initially you're more restricted in this game. But one of the things that I love about Uprising and the way it is presented to you is you are restricted initially, but the board blooms open and you gain these new effects as you plan out your strategies, as you get influence. And so part of the really fascinating thing for me is how and when you go to certain faction spaces to get that second influence, so that I unlock privilege for my next action, right? So that I unlock shipping, so these sorts of things are really important. And I think that they make a lot of sense from a strategic and like a competitive standpoint. I think that they make it more interesting. There's also, I guess we haven't talked about the Bene Gesserit space, but it's a kind of important thing.
It's a
I
bit step
guess.
by step. There's a lot
Yeah.
going with the board, definitely. I do agree.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
espionage has changed as well. Um, yeah, the board, I think overall, the board in a way kind of to me feels a bit like lessons learned from the past, which is obviously partly what Rise of X Immortality was doing anyways to the base game. Because you had certain spaces that weren't necessarily being used all that much, and there were ways of kind of trying to bring kind of extra traffic to those areas. And I think this has been like this kind of like almost rewrite in a way of the original board and retweaking it. I feels like an attempt to kind of like give greater balance and agency, and just allowing people more options and more reason to go to these various spaces. Like the Hall of Oratory, for example, change to the Assembly Hall, for example, it feels pretty good now. Going to Assembly
Oh
Hall with a
yeah.
dagger for like a persuasion and an intrigue, that's pretty good. And you think like back to the old Hall of Oratory or like tech negotiation, they were kind of dead spots a lot of the time, unless you were going there for a specific reason, or you had literally nothing else to do. Now, some people will go Assembly Hall like first action because they want to get those intrigues built up for them. Looking obviously to buy some decent cards, stuff like that. Gather Support is a deceptively decent space. In fact, I would say like the entire council area of Uprising just feels so much more dynamic than it used to be. Because the spaces just feel better. High council you can revisit. Imperial Privilege, I've got to make a mention to as well. Um, it's really awkward for me because I really enjoyed the Mentat space for base Dune Imperium. But I think the truth was that, especially when Immortality came out, that it kind of just got bastardized.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and
Yeah.
and
I
that
agree.
is just what it is. Like it got very spammy. I still say like it always amuses me. It's like it's round 9 in an XMO game, and an Ilban's first action goes straight to Mentat. And it never isn't funny to me that you see that and that you almost expect it half the time. It just is what it is. That's the way it goes sometimes,
Well,
and that's unfortunate. So Imperial Privilege, like the tweak to it, to like make it so you can't stall anymore at Mentat. Like you've got to replace another agent. It forces people to interact with the board more. You've got to make that initial move on the board before you could go there immediately first if you really wanted to, but you're losing so much value. Like you're not really ever going to do that.
yeah, yeah. That's a really good point. I think the most important change for me about Imperial Privilege versus the Mentat space, because I loved the Mentat space, and I thought that was a really clever way to jump the action queue and to
Mm.
go last. I really like that, but it keeps that same functionality. You're still doing that with the Imperial Privilege space. It just costs one more, but I don't think the cost is as important, honestly, as the fact that you have to do it as your second action in order
Mm.
to get value out of it. I think that that's a really clever change, and that makes you have to plan out your turn a little bit more differently. Because like I'd be pressed to go like, man, if only I could hit Imperial Privilege first, draw my card, get
Yeah.
better options.
You
But you
can't
can't
just
do
stall
that.
out the board. Yeah, you
Yeah, you
can't
can't just do
stall.
that.
You can't just say, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm going to see what happens. That's not an option to you anymore. You're forced to interact with the board. You're forced to interact with the players. You're forced to like make an early decision. And the thing is that you've got to bear in mind, obviously, where you go first is also an issue. Because like if you're desperate to go Highliner, well, if you're going Highliner first on like a round 7 conflict, you kind of can't go Imperial Privilege because then you're kind of having to recall your Highliner agent, and of course you don't want anyone else going there. So, it for me it addresses some of the issues that I think had developed with the Mentat. I agree. The Mentat space was cool, but I think it had just run its course, and I think this
Well,
is a nice refreshing way of kind of viewing. It still performs a lot
yeah.
of the similar sort of it has a lot of the good, but it cuts out a lot of the things that weren't quite working for it, and we're kind of getting a bit old and stale of it. So I do think, yeah, the Imperial Privilege specifically is a great change, and there's a lot of other great changes on the board though as well.
Yeah, but one more before we move on. I want to say also it's a change, I think, born out of necessity of the restricted spaces on the board, which is to tie it back into what we were talking about a moment ago, that you are pulling an agent off the board, which is opening up a space for another player. So that dynamic is really clever, because before you had more open spaces, so like having a space cluttered up on the board didn't matter as much, but now it matters a lot more because there are fewer options. And late game, if you get stuck with without like access to like shipping or something like that to get a bump or something like that, and you don't have faction access, you really feel those constraints. You really start to feel a little bit claustrophobic on the board. And additionally, the another cool thing about that Imperial privilege space is because you pull that agent off the board, not only are you opening up a space for another player, but you're potentially opening up the space for you if you wanted to double down on a space if nobody goes there. So I think that's really interesting. So you could potentially hit a faction 3 times or more if you have other like wonky combo things like, the Sardaukar recall or whatever. But like that opens up a lot of interesting plays and this is what kind of going back to our initial discussion of Uprising versus Dune base game, is that these plays are not immediately visible, and those kinds of nuance are not visible, I'd say, on maybe your first 3 or 4 plays, because there's so many other things that you're noodling with, you're figuring out. So I think that this, that's one of the reasons I like this one so much, is it's got this rich decision space. There's lots of interesting ways to play with it, but again, it comes at that barrier of entry. So yeah, I love the space. I love the change. I do miss Mentat, but and going back to playing digital, I was like, oh man, it just feels good to just like go Mentat first action. It just really feels good to do that. But it's the different flavor, right? It's a different flavor.
Yeah,
All right.
Completely agree. It's just better.
Yeah, so let's move on. Okay, so we talked about the restrictions on the board. I kind of wanted to touch on the changes to combat or conflict.
Okay.
There are some pretty massive changes in Uprising. I think this is almost the most significant change to the way the game plays through variants. So basically variation on the existing structure. So we have these 10 conflicts, right? You play 10 conflicts, 1 level 1, 5 level 2s, and 4 level 3s. The 4 level 3s are all the same, but they're ordered in different ways, so they're coming. Now, in Dune Imperium and Ixen Uprising, you had these conflicts that had 1 or 2 points on them, and specifically the level 3s had like 2 points on them. But they couldn't really do it that same way because of the way that worms work in this game, because worms double any reward that you get from the conflict. So if you were to just get 4 points out of nowhere, that'd be kind of too good, right? But so they've kind of added that into the game in a way that makes sense, but is a little bit fiddly. I'm going to say this is one of the things in this game that I think is a little fiddly. So on each of the conflict cards, players can see this little icon. Either it's a desert mouse, a crysknife, or an ornithopter, a yellow, green, or blue icon. Now, players start with one of these cards dealt to them, these like icon cards. That's not a conflict card, but it's just an icon. And what happens is if you win a conflict, you also get that conflict card, and you add it to your pool of cards. And if you have 2 of the matching symbols, you can flip them face down and get a point. So essentially what it is every conflict is worth about half a point sometimes. You start with that half a point. And so they were able to take a lot of those rewards off of those cards and put other ones on, because there's not a lot of space on those cards. Those cards are pretty small, and they have to fit first, second, and third place conflict rewards in addition to all the other graphical stuff on the card. So this is a kind of interesting dual purpose. It let them fill in more resources on those cards, but it also let them take those points off of them, specifically from the first, second, first and second level conflicts, they've kind of just removed almost all of them, all of the points. I think there's like one or two maybe that have points.
There's one or two where like you have to spend a resources amount to acquire them, but there's no just like you win Carfag, you get a victory point. You know, it doesn't work that way anymore.
Right. So, and this is, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, because this is one of my sticking points that I've kind of been, I'm not sure about with Uprising, is that conflict has become more central to the game. It was always kind of central. It was happening, but you can ignore conflicts and plan your turn, plan your next round, do whatever, and kind of just say like, I didn't want to get involved. But because it could be a point for someone else, you're incentivized to get in there and deny them that point. Which I have, there's this kind of like almost sunk cost fallacy involved in this, because you keep committing. You can commit to the conflict to try to beat somebody who's going to win it, and maybe they win the game or something like that, or maybe you win it, bankrupt yourself, and then the person gets the next conflict anyway. Like there's some interesting dynamic there that is weird. So I wanted to touch on this because there's three things that not just bother me, but I think that the three things that I think are points that competitive players have raised, and things that I've heard, and things that I personally feel strongly about. One is doubling rewards too strong. Two, are the icons on the tops of the conflict cards fun? And three, is there too much randomness in conflict now? And the randomness has to do with, you are dealt a random card at the beginning of the game, one that gives you either the first player token and it's a desert mouse, or it's a crysknife or another desert mouse. In a 3-player game, there's also an ornithopter card. Sometimes, and I've seen some Board Game Geek posts about this, where the players had like 3 of the same icons show up in a row, and then they're like, well, I could never pair my icon ever. They're like, wow, and they're like, it's just a 1% chance of that happening, or whatever, you know. There's like
I've seen the threads. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so there's that aspect of it. Now, Dune
should
Imperium,
we probably just tackle that before we get into more? Because obviously combat is this is a big topic.
Yeah.
So
let's
we
start
should
with
probably
that.
break this down as parts we go. I will agree that there has been definitely a shift for Uprising. You know, based on Imperium, obviously, it's always interesting because based on Imperium is that mix of, obviously you've got like the Euro style worker placement. There's a bit of deck building, there's a bit of PvP, and that sort of thing. And the amount whether that's varied, I suppose, has varied a little bit over the expansions. But there's absolutely no question that Dune Imperium Uprising has a much greater focus on decisive combat. It is a big part of the game now. I think that is one of the things that folks that have played a lot of base game, especially with XMO, coming from that background and coming to Uprising, and myself included, I'm sure CJ included, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this included, it's an adjustment that maybe is a little difficult to make, because we're used to it being in a certain way, and now like being involved in those conflicts, round 7, round 8 sort of thing. I wouldn't want to say feel mandatory, but the emphasis on
I will say that
the emphasis on decisive combat, especially with worm victories, is very, very significant, and that is an adjustment that we have to make. Your margin is going to vary in that a little bit. That is just an assessment of that. Let's start with the icons first of all. I think that's the first place. That's probably the best place to get to for the icons. I admittedly wasn't initially sold on the battle icon matching system when I first saw it. When it first came up in Design Diary number, whichever one it was, I can't recall off the top of my head. I got what it was trying to do, but on the face of it, on paper, I wasn't the most sold. It felt a little bit maybe unnecessary, and it was like kind of like, do I need to be playing a matching game or playing Dune Imperium? In actual playing, I think personally it's borne out better than I expected. I think it's interesting on 2 fronts. You obviously bring up that like, you know, sometimes players feel a need to get involved in combats more necessarily to deny other people scoring a load of points, and that does sometimes happen. I do think the flip side is if someone perhaps was maybe not too keen on getting involved in a combat at the beginning of the round, and then it flips up and it's an icon they can match, like, oh, actually, maybe I might actually commit for this instead. I think the idea, and I think a lot of the ideas about Uprising, is that I feel like it's attempting to make players have to engage with each other more. We talk about it sometimes. I do talk about it occasionally when I'm covering games like Ximo about the concept of people playing solitaire. And when I talk about that, what I mean is someone gets to a situation where they can just basically decide to stop interacting with the board and the other players and fairly confidently just play amongst themselves, draw some cards, buy some flows, and just win the game.
Yeah, but that's
And
not gone from the game. I don't think
I'm
that's
not,
ever gone from the game.
I'm
It
not
just
gonna,
means that
yeah,
doesn't happen maybe quite as much.
no,
There's still
it
solitaire strategies that exist in Uprising.
there are, although I do think that they are sometimes enabled by the table not dealing with that, but that's a totally different conversation. Let's not get into that right. I do think it's a lot harder to do, however. And I do think the various combat changes make that happen. I think unless you've got like a pretty comprehensive deck advantage, like, there's been maybe 2 or 3 really good cards only that have come out, and you've got them all. Other than that, I do think you kind of are you're incentivized to get involved in combat either for your own benefit or because you're scared of what other people are going to gain from combat. And Worms does definitely have a part of that. But I'll get to that in a second. But I do actually think personally, I don't mind the icons. I didn't think I was going to like it. I actually think it's okay. It's a little tweak, a little bit extra sort of something going on to kind of just try and wing people into getting involved in combats. Because, like, oh, okay, well, there's my battle icon. I'm kind of like if half there to go for combat. If I don't go for this combat now when I know it's there, when is it next going to turn up? Because it will eventually turn up, but it might not turn up for 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds potentially. You don't know. So I do think it's a way of kind of like trying to drag people, maybe, or trying to give people a reason to not just play amongst themselves and have to kind of interact with the board as a whole, which I think is at least a noble effort. At least I can't fault the idea about that.
Yeah.
But then we get into stuff like the worms and the shield walls.
Well, hold on.
Which is
Before we get there,
oh, you want to? Okay, you got more.
I still have
Okay,
more
go
stuff
on.
to say about these
The match.
these conflict
Okay, do
cards.
so.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We're just kind of
Oh, there is something I
free-flowing,
did forget to mention. Yeah, good point. Fair enough. Carry on.
Yeah, so in Dune Imperium with 4 players, and I have only really played this 4 players. I have no interest in playing a 3-player. I've heard stories that this has some issues with 3-player because of the way that the conflict system works now. But anyway, the interesting thing about Dune Imperium at 4-player, there are only the 2 icons given out to players for the reason that they wanted everyone to be on kind of equal footing. However, not all of the conflicts are equal in their value. I find a lot of the conflicts, the Chris Knife conflicts specifically, to be way better than most of the mouse conflicts. Most of the mouse conflicts are behind the walls, which means you can't double them if you have worms. But the Chris Knife conflicts are easier to double. I think maybe not all of them, but at least the level 2s, they're probably evenly distributed, and I'm just making a mistake here, but they feel like they're just simply better. Specifically, like you get all these influence bumps that are not behind walls, so you can just throw out worms and double those effects if you win it. Those are massive conflicts to win. Like that essentially unlocks board spaces for you if it's like an emperor or a spacing guild or Fremen. You can get an alliance, you can unlock new spaces, and you get points on top of it, so if it matches. So there's that. The one thing that it feels to me a little bit like there's too many ways to get these secret fiddly points. I don't really like that we start with a card that gives us half a point. I'm going to come out and say that. I don't like that. I think it's imbalance in a way that's not very interesting. It's like, here, you have an icon. Oh, you've got a different icon. Is your icon better than mine? I don't know. We'll see. That doesn't seem fun to me. That's one of the things I wish we didn't have in this game.
Yeah, I can get what you mean.
But more than that, I think that because we already start in 4 players at 1 point, we actually are starting at 1.5 points. Which obviously makes sense. They're taking points out of the game and putting them in different places. So I don't know that that actually improves conflict for me. I always felt like if you're going conflict, you build a deck to go conflict, and to fight. You do that. You can still do that. But it also feels like you are almost more incentivized to get into these conflicts when you just don't want to do that. You don't have the resources to do it, and you're like, I'm priced into doing this, and if I don't, I'm giving it to someone else. And so it feels even worse when you don't go into the conflict. It has, for me, the opposite of the intention, which is to keep people engaged in conflict. For me, it feels like I don't want to be engaged in these conflicts. Why are you forcing me to do this? Like that kind of bothers me as a person who wants to have more agency in this game. Whereas I like the conflict, or the parts of the game that are giving me more agency. I feel that conflict takes away a lot of agency, and I don't like that. So
you feel forced into situations that you'd rather not be involved in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's obviously done intentionally, and with good purpose, but from a player perspective, and I don't know if any of you out there echo this experience, but I like feeling that I have a choice. But sometimes in these conflicts, obviously I have a choice to not go into the conflict. I always have those choices. But it also feels like if I do that, and more often I feel that I'm giving the game to somebody, and I don't, that feels bad, because of the way that points kind of they're hidden in those icons. You're like, oh, they're getting a point and they're doubling their rewards.
Yeah,
like,
I was going to say,
man, this
is not just the combats. Like, a lot of this factors into when worms get involved. I think that's what. I mean, that's what, like, I do think the two are very interlinked here.
Did you want to say one more thing about the icons before we move on to the worms? Because I think
yeah,
that's also important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural move on here. Like, I don't know. I'm unsure. Like, it's a different philosophy. It's a way of getting to it. I think personally, like, kind of giving people reasons to, like, maybe get involved and be a bit more opportunistic in combats, I think inherently I don't personally have much of an issue with. But the problem is, it's when worms start getting involved, and especially like some of the conflicts. If you get some of the conflicts come like in round 2, round 3, like protect the sieges, test our loyalty, and stuff like that, which give buckets of resources, and these are combats that are not protected by shield walls. And if someone got that early access to worms and can just barrel in, that cannot feel the greatest. Sometimes you just can't stop people getting worms that fast. Be it they won an initial skirmish, be it they've got they fluked an intrigue, stuff like that. Like, sometimes these things do happen. So I can understand reservations. But I do think if there are issues with that, it's not just because of this. It's about worms and shield wall, which is where we're going to get to next year.
Yeah. So let's move on to the worms. So, all right, I 100% agree with you. It's not just an issue with the conflict cards icons, which are a little fiddly. It's something to explain to somebody. You're like, by the way, do this matching thing, but that's fine. That's not hard. People can understand that. The next thing that we want to talk about is how worms improve or change conflict. So a worm is worth 3 strength in conflict. It's kind of like a dreadnought, but it can't go back to your garrison. It only just disappears. Right, it goes back to the sand, back to the desert. So you have these worms for 1 conflict, and then they go away. There are only 2 spaces on the board that allow you to get a worm. That is Haga Basin and Deep Desert. Haga Basin costs 1 water to go there, and Deep Desert costs 3 water to go there. But before you can do that, you have to get level 2 level 2 on the Fremen space, and then go to Siege Tabor, which gives you your Maker's Hooks. Once you get your Maker's Hooks, then you can go summon worms. That's the kind of process. It's a 3-step process. Get influence, get hooks, get worms.
Yep.
So I think all of that in theory works very well. I like that tension of who's getting Maker's Hooks when they're getting them. I like the tension of who's going to get worms, who's put spies on worm spaces so they can keep going there. Those things are really cool. I like the tension that the worms bring, because we know after a couple games you'll realize that they are really, really, really good. Not just because they give you 3 strength, it's just because they double rewards. And doubling rewards is pretty massive. It's an unbelievable game changer that this is one of the reasons I have a hard time kind of like winning this game. Is like I'm generally more of a kind of player who likes to play spice must flows, and the game forces you into more conflict. So you really do have to pay attention to those level 3s that can give you 2 points normally, maybe 1 point from paying, and if you can pay for it again, you can double that, so you can get 4 points total from a card. And then if your icon matches, it could be 5 points. Like a 5-point round for you, it just wins you most of the time. Wins you the game.
Yeah, it's decisive conflict.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
although I would quickly mention, I actually personally think that it's getting those worms on like those round 3, round 4 conflicts. I think are just as important, maybe even more so sometimes, especially if it's like, you think like Protect the Siege is the one I always bring. Protect the Siege is the worm conflict early. If you can get like any position on that with a worm, like it's insane. You think you just limp in a worm maybe for like 3rd place, that's 4 spice. You win it, like that sets you up for the rest of the game. From an alliance, enough water to host a swimming convention, and you've just got absolutely tons of firepower. I think in a way sometimes those are even more important. And obviously, and then you're winning those and you're pairing conflicts. I definitely agree. Obviously, the tier 3s and being able to like double up, those hard victory points and the opportunity to spend a lot of resources to win those points also is pretty good. But I think in a way sometimes if you can get like worms on like some of those early ones, like the one that gives you like the wild bump spice freighters, if you can get that, if you can win that with a worm and pay the both sets of free spice for a victory point, like your massive favorite to win the game, stuff like that.
yeah, 100%, 100% agree.
And that could be a massive swing like really early, and it can be really hard for people to come back to that as well.
Yeah, so I wasn't trying to deflect from the level 2s, but I think that I 100% agree with you. The level 2s are actually, I think, more of a problem than the level 3s winning 5 points. I think winning 5 points, that's something you're just going to have to get used to. There are going to be games where someone's sitting at 6 points or 5 points. They win 5 points from conflict and win the game by a margin of like 5 points. That happens, and it's going to happen in this game more. And it's also one of my maybe it's both a good thing and a bad thing. It creates interesting tension, and it creates that kind of drama that I love in this game. But at the same time,
it's very alien to us. We're not used to this at all.
It's also a little bit deflating when you see the final score and you're like, that person's at 10, we were at 5. What happened? Like, those sorts of things don't feel good from a post games perspective when you're like, it wasn't really that close, was it? No, it was. It probably was. It came down to the last conflict and somebody won. But that feels more like a Hail Mary style game, and this game does feel more like Hail Mary than like incrementally who's going to get the last couple points, which is what Imperium felt like initially, right? It's like we're creeping up, we're racing to 10 points, we're racing there. Who's there first? It feels like get to 5, then get 5 points, or get to 6, get 4 points.
It can get very swingy. Yeah. There's no doubt about that, but, and then people are just kind of accumulating points of like friendships and like maybe a couple of faction alliances, and then all of a sudden someone just like charged into round 7 conflict and then finds some worms out of somewhere and they just win the game. Like that isn't. I mean, that's the way it goes sometimes. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it cannot feel great. You feel like you had like a pretty decent advantage. You're just like, okay, I just need this one thing not to happen, and then it happens, and then you've lost. And that's
right. And in that way, I guess it's fine. This doesn't happen all the time, and obviously, I've had more than 50 games of this now. I can say that it happens some of the time. I don't know what percentage of the time. I didn't keep track of that, but I'll say that there are many games I've had that have been closer. Like people are like at 10, 9, 8, 7 points, or 11, 10, 9, 8 points. There have been lots of those. So in some ways, some of the games resemble like Immortality in its tightness, and sometimes it doesn't. But that's okay. I'm fine with that variability. Now, I'm not saying that that's a hit against the game or anything like that. I'm saying like that creates this kind of drama that I like, but sometimes I'd say the amount of points that you reflect on the board doesn't feel right. Like I feel like I played more than a 5-point game, or I've played more than a 6-point game, but somehow it just didn't work out that way. That'll happen.
Yeah. I can see like if you finish at like 8 points, for example, in base Dune Imperium, you can kind of plot out, okay, not just obviously look and say, how did I score those points? But it's not like you ever like, unless like something crazy happened in a final conflict where you were going to score like a bucket of points and then like get some end game off because of it as well. Like typically speaking, like your results kind of reflect fairly reasonably what you'd achieved in that game. Whereas, yeah, like you can have a game like 5 points, and then maybe someone just jumped in front of Alliance out of nowhere, and then you lose out on like a tier 3 conflict by a couple of swords because they, pulled a trade, he's flunked an intrigue out of his worm and won it, and it's like, well, what do? You can't really,
It's
that
great
stuff like
phrase
that.
right there.
Yeah. I can understand why some people perhaps aren't a big fan of that. I can get that.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, I like the level 3s. I've come to understand their importance, and you kind of plan around that. A lot of people online have also mentioned this, not a lot, but I've mentioned a couple of BGG threads. There's one in particular I mentions like, feels like you just have to plan for the level 3s or you're out of the game. And I think that that's not an awful thing in a lot of ways. It is an end game situation. The game kind of ends either round 7 or round 8, something like that. So you feel like there is an urgency to kind of like ramp up for those. I personally wish that games went like not default 7 rounds, but default 8 rounds, because 8 rounds feels like every game that goes past 7 rounds for me feels so much more fun, because that initial tension, yeah, you're like, oh my gosh, somebody could win this round, and then it goes on and you're like, oh my gosh, who's gonna win? That's great. That's why Dune Imperium is so fun, is because that uncertainty, you're like, I don't know who's going to win now. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, those are really fun moments.
Yeah, and it feels like everyone in 8-round games kind of had a bite of the cherry sort of thing. Especially in Uprising, I feel like if it ends in 7 rounds, it's usually a pretty crushing, comprehensive victory, where like halfway into the round, it's pretty clear who's already won the match. And that's not too great. And that's something I have noticed in some of my games. Like, yeah, there's definitely some that are close. But there's been quite a few where like you're halfway into round 7 and like the person's already got a bucket of troops in, they've got their worms in, and there's no realistic way of anyone stopping them, and you're kind of just playing it out. And
that does happen.
That does happen from time to time. And the thing is, well, there's not a ton of intrigues in the deck which actually give you a ton of combat strength. There are some that are good and some that are very, very strong, but quite a few of them have additional requirements to get those extra strengths, like either lifting spies, having influence, or, paying like free spies to spies, that sort of thing. They do exist, but it feels to me a bit more combat is a little bit more towards actual physical weight of troops in the conflict than like intrigues. There's exceptions, of course, like when we ever get it up, like the game we played with Paul Denham, for example, and I won it because I had like 5 battle intrigues. Stuff like that does happen. Obviously, it's pretty absurd stuff, but I do find there are some games where like halfway into like round 7, it's over because someone's gotten a high line and they've got a Spire Hager base and they've just absolutely just thrown everything in and they're going to score 5 points and like you get kind of stuck playing for second, and that does happen. It's not to criticize the player. Sometimes set up. I mean, to be fair, like we talked about it in North Carolina, Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast. That was basically how he played his tournament. He just played for round 7s to win round 7s, get tons of points, and win games, and it worked. So
it's a really good strategy. And that's how the game works now.
And that's just something we have to adjust to as a lot of us playing a lot of XMO. We're just not used to this, and that's part of the adjustment process, for sure. But there's bringing up. I was gonna say, go on. There was more to want about worms, but go on.
Yeah, and I got a little distracted while I was talking, but okay, we'll come back to the intrigues in a second. I have a couple things to say about that, but
we'll get to that.
So the conflict 2s, specifically the ones that give water, I find problematic in this game.
I do. I think I have to agree, especially when people start chucking worms at them, like the trade dispute, for example. That is, and to be fair, I think personally speaking, I think kind of all of the Desert Mouses ones in the conflict 2s, because they all give water or an absolute crazy amount of resources, and if you have a worm on basically any of those, like that is absolutely enormous. I do agree. I have an issue with them.
I have an issue with these because it's a situation where the rich get richer in this game. Specifically, if you are position 2 or position 3 who get worms early, round 2, round 3, you are able to fight for those those conflicts that have water, second place, like second place water. All you have to do, and maybe even better, they gave you better second place rewards, which I think was, I don't know, it kind of bothers me because there are, like, you really should be fighting for first place, not second place.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
fighting
mean,
for
it's
second
it's
place, it's like I'm fighting for second place, which is a better reward than you're getting because I have worms in the conflict. I'm getting double, like 2 water, like 4 troops or whatever it is, like 2 troops. Like that is backbreaking because not only does extra water fund more worms, but therefore it funds more either second or first places down the road. It sets you up for a level 3. Like, so I don't really know how I feel about the worms in general. Like, sometimes they're fine, especially when I think that it's fine when there are more of the level 2s that have the shield wall. I really like the shield wall as a concept. I like it thematically. I think it makes a lot of sense and works really well in this game. You have to go to Siege Tabor and take basically just a single water and blow up the shield wall instead of getting a troop, a water, and your Maker's Hook. So the decision is interesting in theory. There are also a bunch of intrigue cards that do it. There are 2 called Detonation that just destroy the wall for no cost whatsoever. There's one that costs 2 water and destroys the wall and gives you a worm. And there are 2 more that just have you recall a spy to blow up the wall and give you 2 spice.
Yeah.
So
they're pretty juicy, yeah.
I find this tension interesting, but I find that the intrigue cards undermine that a little bit in a way that I don't love.
Yeah, I do. I want to just quickly backpedal just so you mentioned about the weighting of conflict rewards. There's one I'm sure it's going to be brought up by several people, and that's Chrome security. As I give you, I'm sure, more editing work to do on the inevitable video on this.
Just explain what it does. I don't want to put it up. No, I'm just kidding.
It's fine. Yeah, so Chrome security is one of the level 2 conflicts. First place is a spacing bump, a contract, and a troop. But second place is a water, 2 Solari, and 2 troops. And I've definitely seen a few situations where people will put in a worm and like a couple of troops or something because they simply don't care which reward they get. Because the top reward perhaps is a bit more situational. Like, obviously getting those spacing bumps is good. But like the contracts, not be anything particularly out there. And if you're going for a very heavy combat strat, 2 water and 4 troops seems a lot more appetizing to then go for future fights. And so I do find situations where that it's weird. The idea. So the question is, are some tier 2 second rewards better than first place?
Yes, they are.
I think it depends slightly on how you evaluate. Like, there are some where just in physical, tangible rewards, they're technically better. The Ornithopter Skirmish is an Intrigue on one side, Intrigue in 2. Trade dispute, for example, going back to it, it's a question of, do you want the contract or do you want the spice? If you're worming, maybe the spice is better for you. That will pay for like going to espionage or making up for the fact that obviously if you're going worms, you're not getting hold of the loose spice because you're obviously doing that sort of thing. It's an interesting byplay. But Charm Security is one where I do find someone will just literally will go into worms because they just don't care at what they get because they're all really strong for them. And that can be a problem. The other thing I want to get into before we get into the intrigues, though, it does get into the shield discussion, which we also need to talk about, is because worms are really good, it does have a very dramatic effect of warping how the beginning of the game goes. And the prevalent thing that people are doing to start off with, this may or may not persist, is that everyone feels obligated to just bum rush the Fremen at any physical label spot because they feel they've got to get hooks so they can get worms and they can double combat rewards. It reminds me a little bit of back in the Rise of X days where everyone just absolutely bum rushes the Spacing Guild immediately because shipping is so strong. And that gives me slight nightmares because I didn't really enjoy those days. One of the things I liked about Immortality is it felt like it gave, if you either couldn't get there because you didn't draw the access, or if you were like fourth player in Rise of X was not a fun place to be because you were never getting to shipping first. You might get like a round or 2 of it maybe, and then it goes past you, and then you probably don't see it for the rest of the game. unless you've got infiltration. So that was a bad place to be, and it feels a little bit like that again,
Well,
where
sort
like
of, sort of. I mean,
it's a little bit. It's different because obviously there's tactic. There's two different Fremen spots now, so in theory it's easier to get to. But I do feel like there is almost like an obligation to get hooks immediately, so you just spam worms on every single conflict that you physically can, and I don't know how much I like that.
So I 100% agree that there is a spamming going on of worms. That is annoying. It's very annoying, especially since one of the leaders gets rewarded for it.
Yeah.
And the other leader that I'm done talking about, Gurney and Paul Muad'Dib, are the two combat leaders. And if they're in second or third position, you should just basically resign from going to conflict and getting first place for a while, because
Yeah.
you're not going to get anything. Or if you can
Yeah.
somehow snake a point out of something here or there,
Yeah.
be very lucky.
Yeah. The
Because it's
problem
very
is that
hard.
yeah, the problem is that you can win them, but the issue is it's going to be very expensive for you. And of course, the problem is, and what's happening is because worms double any reward. If it was just worms double the reward if you win, this would be a completely different conversation. But that's not where we're at here. It doubles anything. So again, like say protect the Sietches, for example. If you win that conflict with like a Highliner trip, great. All right, you get the Fremen bump, the war and the troop. That's all well and good. But second place, their worms getting 6 spice and 2 troops.
Yeah, that's a
And
problem.
and this is the problem. You have spent a lot of resources to deny them winning, because winning that conflict, for example, is crazy. They're getting 2 water, they're getting the Fremen alliance a lot of the time, but they're getting 2 bumps, they're getting 3 water, they're getting troops. All right, you've won the conflict that's decent for you, but they're still getting an absolute bucket ton of resources. And so even though you've spent a lot of effort and in time denying them that, they kind of don't care a lot of the time, because okay, I've got 6 spice, I'm just gonna go Highlander, I'm just gonna keep throwing worms in, and I'm just still gonna keep barreling along. And unless like you get a load of shield wall conflicts coming up, which kind of hinder that, which sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't see a single shield wall. Shield wall conflict until round 8. I've seen that. Where it was the skirmish, none of them are shield walled. There are 6 out of 9 conflicts in the conflict 2s are not protected by shield wall. So you can definitely draw 5 of those, and then you pull propaganda first up for the conflict 3s. That's 7 rounds of like Paul and Gurney just bombing in worms any opportunity they can, and no way to really stop them getting involved, constantly doubling resources. This is obviously an extreme situation, but it kind of gives an idea of how this thing can really snowball a lot.
So yeah,
and this does
I
go
agree.
into the shield wall conversation, which we do need to talk about.
Yeah, so just as a caveat, I know we've been talking a lot about like especially my things that I'm not super enthused about. I still love the game. Like you have to think about this as I'm not putting the game down. Like I love this game, and I love the overall package and everything, and I accept that things are going to be wonky. So when I come at this from a perspective of criticism, it's not from I dislike it. It's from a perspective of I love this game enough to make these criticisms and think about how we can either strategize around these problems or, maybe create some conversation for the expansions or things like that, or things we'd like to see. So that's where I'm coming from. I just want to point this out. I'm not sure like dumping on this game or anything like that. And you can probably thinking about, wow, they've been going on for like 30 minutes about how conflicts are so awful. It's like, no, they're not. They're not all awful. They're very interesting. I kind of attribute them
conversations, and this is the biggest part of this game without question. So it warrants a lot of diving into. Like combats have always been big in Dune Imperium, but now these are like the game makers and game breakers of the game. Like you can have a decent
100%.
faction game, you can buy spices flows, but if you're not winning some of these conflicts, it's very, very difficult to win now.
And I'd say you have to win one big conflict. Yeah. I mean, if you win one big conflict, you probably win the game if you've done your work elsewhere. Probably.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've seen games end round 6. I've seen games end without the level 3s. I've seen games go till 9 or 10 rounds, and because of wacky stuff like people tying in round 7, or and then they're exhausted for round 8, like things like that happen.
Or
It's really
people were
cool.
gearing up for tons of worm combat, and then the
Yeah,
shield walls came up, and then they. So shield wall is something that we do need to talk about as well. I assume
sure.
that's where you were going next.
Yeah, I was going to get to the shield wall. I will say one final cap in the resources being doubled thing. I am a little disappointed, a little bit, that water is rewarded in level 2s.
Mm.
And either or that worms don't just double the winners. Like if you were just the winner and you won with worms, I would say that that'd be fine. Because and then you could have water in second position, I'd be fine, or whatever, second place. Giving 1 water back for your investment of 1 or 2 or 3 water, I'd say that'd be fine. You committed, you didn't get there. That's like throwing your, all in into the pot of the poker pot and saying, I hope I get it. Like I get something back, that's fine. But what it frequently feels like, and this is what I encourage, and I hope that Direwolf Digital consider this when they're doing any sort of updates to the next expansion or whatever. What it feels like as a player is that worm players can throw in any amount, usually their entire amount, and just say like it's all in, but I don't have to win.
No,
I'm going to win either way, and that doesn't feel good.
There's no tactical choice. Like
there's no tactical choice. That's right.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Muad'Dib because he is like, absolutely focused on that, and that's fine. But like, if you're like, not even a gurney, like if you've just got worms anyways, you're playing as like, Fade Ralpher, or it doesn't really matter who you're playing as. If you can go to Haga Basin and you have the opportunity to throw in a worm for the conflict, but there's no bonus spice, what reasons are there to not throw a worm in? What situation has got to be
Right.
on the board for you to not want to
Exactly.
throw a worm in? And other than like maybe test the loyalty because you don't think you need the money, although the money always has usage because you can go back to High Council. Like, there's never really a tactical consideration of like, maybe I should take the spice this time. You just always chuck in the worm because you're like, well, I'm chucking the worm. I'm quote giving up 2 spice, but I'm making more than that from the conflict, and I'm denying people that anyways. So there's never any kind of there's no thought to it. Like you're never like there never feels a reason to not take the spice unless maybe you've got like a specific intrigue that
so
needs it.
That's
Other
the main
than
thing.
that,
Yeah.
that's basically it. Or maybe like you feel absolutely desperate to get to like shipping or something like that. But yeah, you never see like Gurney Hallett go to Haga Basin when there's a business advice and say, "Oh, I'm gonna take the 2 spice." They just chuck
Actually,
in the worm.
that's not true. I do see that happening.
I mean,
I
overall,
think that choice is interesting.
It does happen on occasion, but I don't think it happens anywhere near as much as perhaps it could do. Like it maybe is, from my experience, like 10% of the time, maybe 50.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's almost always I'm going there and I'm just chucking a worm in. It almost doesn't matter what the conflict is. I can chuck a worm in and I'm going to do it because I'm just going to get so much out of this fight wherever the heck I finish up.
So, yeah, that's a good point. I think that most of the time, and I think that's where the meta is right now, is like chuck a worm in. I do think that there is a lot of merit to players blocking Haga Basin, putting a spy there blocking Haga Basin, just for spice, because spice is really, really hard to come by. So it makes a lot of sense to me that they added a bunch of spice to the conflicts and you can double them, because otherwise, how are you going to get your spice? It is very challenging. But when I think your investment yields more than double what you put into it, or sorry, your reward is more than double what you put into it, in a way that also is kind of snowbally. That's where I say there's something wrong with these conflicts that give water. I think if it just gave you spice, then it's like you're paying water to turn it into spice. That's fine, or troops. Yeah. That makes sense to me. But if you're paying water to get more water back, then it's like, I'm going to put in this pot. I'm not going to win, but I'm going to double it anyway. It's like, what?
And
that doesn't make any sense.
Well. It's water on every single one. Like, that's crazy in a way. So like, every single thing gives water. And Protect the Sietches is the one I always throw out. Like, Protect the Sietches is too strong. Like, second place, like, if you get a worm in, like, say if this is, like, the 3rd round, and you get a worm in, like, and you get second, that's 3rd round, you're getting 6 spice and 2 troops on a game where you're right, it isn't easy to come across spice sometimes, because obviously the space is getting hit, people worming, and then the battle dudes being given 6 spice. Like it's absolutely like
Yeah,
crazy when that comes
yeah,
up early. And if
I
someone
agree.
gets that worm, like any reward for that is so transformative. So that is a problem. I
My
protect sieges is a bit much.
Yes, I agree. That is one of the problem ones. It's especially problematic in a conflict when the winner of the first place conflict, or of first place in the conflict, uh, feels bad about winning because the second place is better. Like,
Yeah.
but like that. If you're just throwing in troops, you're throwing in troops to win this conflict. Obviously, this requires a little bit of reprogramming of your mindset from base game to Imperium.
Hmm.
But if you're throwing in, you highline. Let's say you win the conflict. Someone just throws a worm in a couple troops and gets second place, gets tons of stuff, and you're like, okay, I got a bump. I can pay 3 for a point, and then I get an icon that may or may not match. Like, I feel like if I was looking at this as a transactional experience, I'd say like that player fairly paid what they paid, 5 spice and 5 troops or even more to get maybe 2 points, maybe 3 if that bump also contributed to a point. So that feels fair. And maybe they played some combat cards. But for someone to spend 1 water and 2 troops, let's just say, for seven strength, this happens frequently to get second
Yeah.
place because everyone else is exhausted usually, or they just go like,
Yeah.
I have to do these other things. That's 1 water, 2 troops for, I don't know what, how much, like 4 troops and 2 water. I can't remember what that one is, but
Yeah. Child
it's
security is. I mean, the people you're thinking about, like, for that is spice rated. So second place is a water, a spice, and a troop. So that's 2 water, 2 spice, 2 troops.
so
You
that,
know, which
yeah,
is
that
pretty
math doesn't make
significant.
sense to me. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't feel like the investment of worms uh, is fairly paying off. It feels like it's unfairly paying off in a way that doesn't make sense for what the conflicts should be doing. They should be pushing you to win the conflict, but it doesn't do that most of the time.
So
So
just to throw it out here, just as a little bit of airballing here. So if we were Paul Denon, we wish. But if we were like his, we had the opportunity to would we say maybe worms only double the winning conflict? If you don't win
yeah,
it, you just get whatever's there. Do you
well,
think
that's
that's
what I
the way
thought
they
that
should
they
have gone?
did. When I
Yeah.
first opened when I first was reading about it, I'm like, oh, worms double conflict. I initially thought logically, I was like, oh, well, they must double the winner. Why would they double second place or third place? No, it doesn't work that way. So I was like, I would have just had it double the first place only and leave it. So if you shoot the moon with worms and miss, you're getting stuff back, but you missed. Like, your investment should not be better than the investment of the first place person. I feel like that the
Maybe
rewards
maybe
are
when
are
those
imbalanced.
I would suggest maybe when those uprising candies get started, maybe that's something for us to try.
Oh,
Maybe we should
it's in the
do
brew. Yeah.
some games where worms only double winning conflicts and everything else, and just see where the ground lies. I feel like I'm sure I would bet a mortgage on it. I'm sure that they tried this, and I'm sure that Direwolf must have tried out like only doubling the top reward, doubling all of them. I can't imagine that they didn't think to do that. So it's interesting that they decided to just do all of them. Maybe they felt that only that the response was from players that when they tried doing only the top one, that it felt really punishing because if a leader like Muad'Dib, whatever else, like goes in heavy and then gets picked by an intrigue and they're kind of dead in the water a little bit, maybe that's the response they got. I don't know. I can't speak for him, but maybe that's something that we might learn in the future, maybe as a response, or maybe one day
Yeah,
like he talks to us, which he probably
that's
won't do
fair.
after this podcast because I'm not
No,
sure I'd
that's
want
not true.
to. But you know what I mean. It's interesting. I think it's something we should try. I think it'd be interesting to see what people's responses are. But the problem is that this is how it is, and this is just what we gotta adjust to, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. So anyway, let's move on.
Shield
So
wall.
shield wall. I like the shield wall. I think the shield wall's cool. I think it's one of the more interesting aspects of the game. It does sometimes feel superfluous, some games, and it sometimes feels like the most significant thing in the game, which I love. I think that tension is cool. Like, I played games where nobody blew up the shield wall. We get into level 3s and they're behind the shield wall, and like people are limping in. They don't really know how to win the game because it's like, well, I guess I can pay 6 spice and get a point and maybe this matches me. or I can just do something else. And it's a really interesting dynamic. In my experiences, though, that usually doesn't happen. That's like maybe 1 out of 30 games I think I played where it went to round 3, or sorry, level 3s, and there was no shield wall, or there was a shield wall most of the time. And it behooves the worm player to blow up the shield wall. It does not behoove anyone else to blow up the shield wall unless you have worms or are going to get them. So there is an interesting aspect to this game. There's a little bit of a push your luck. Who's going to do it first? I guess it's like a staring contest, not a push your luck, but there's the intrigues. Yeah. So then there's the brinksmanship. Then there's the intrigues.
Yeah.
There's 5 intrigues that blow up the wall, which in my view is too many. I think it's too easy. Yeah. I think it's too easy.
I kind of agree. I have a lot to say about this. So, first of all, thematics, and this is something that I do compliment this game overall. I always think that these Dune Imperium games, the first one and this one as well, I think have been really cool. The thematics, it's cool in that you don't need to know the Dune universe to play these games, but if you do know the Dune universe, there's an extra level of appreciation for the stuff going on. You know, when I started playing Dune Imperium, all I knew is that Dave Bautista was in it. And I was like, oh yeah, look, that looks like him. That's kind of cool. Now we've got Christopher Walken, who looks absolutely badass as the Emperor. You know, that's super awesome. And thematics definitely ties into some of the game mechanics in the game. The Shield Wall was definitely one of them. If you're not familiar with the Dune universe, Shield Wall makes a lot more sense if obviously you are familiar and like kind of why it exists. And the idea is obviously to like protect the kind of more habitable areas of the planet from the very harsh conditions outside. And that is implemented into the game with the Shield Wall that stops worms being used for certain conflicts that involve the flag control spots of the game, unless someone detonates it. I like the idea that you're kind of tying in theme and game design into one, and it makes sense. I think that's really commendable. I think it's a very cool way of doing it. Of course, there's a but coming, and there is a but coming. As I mentioned earlier, there does feel like a very heavy obligation for people to get stuck in with worms. Some games, it kind of gets fairly balanced out, and some games, that doesn't happen. Someone gets the worms super early, and then for whatever reason, people are like struggling with faction access. It doesn't appear on the row, and they need to like go to, you know, Bene Gesserit because they're card drawing, or they need to go deliver supplies to get to research, or whatever the heck else. You know, there's all sorts of things. You are correct, however. Out of, I don't know how many games I've played. I'd say probably about like 30, 35, 40 games or such. So few games has the wall existed for any, like, getting into the conflict freeze. They're almost always gone. And if they're not gone, they're going to go because of intrigues. And I do agree. The problem you've got, it's both good and bad for me, Siege Tabor. I like, first of all, I like the idea of using Siege to do it. I think it's cool, definitely. But the problem is that because worms are so strong and they give you so many rewards, if you're not getting involved with them, then obviously that's a problem. And the other issue is that, yeah, like if you don't get situations where, say for example, someone can go to Siege Tabor because they've got worms, but then decides to go to Siege Tabor to not blow up the wall. And there isn't really a situation very often where people will go to Siege to try and stop the wall being blown up because it's very strong for their opponents. Because it feels kind of pointless. Because of the fact that there are so many intrigues in the game that just blow up the wall and require very little cost, if really any cost. In fact, 2 of them have no cost requirements whatsoever. And even like lifting a
4
spy.
Well, I don't think a spy is really a cost. I don't say like it's so easy to get spies. Yeah.
Yes, it's more realistically 4. Unexpected Allies is the separate one in which obviously 2 water is significant, but it's significant because the fact that it's the one card where you don't actually need hooks to summon a worm in. And Unexpected Allies can just win games. Like, flat out, I've seen it before. Like, Unexpected Allies just win someone a game, like in a round 6 or something, because it's a big conflict for them. They went highlining, and they're like, oh, I've got the 2 water. Here's a worm. I win the game. That's a separate conversation. That is what it is. So I think there's positives and negatives to the Shield Wall. I think it's interesting that it's kind of leads to these very interesting situations of break, which I was mentioned about, where, like, say if it's round 7, for example, and the shield wall's still existent, and it's like, say, Imperial Basin or whatever else, and obviously you've got 2 or 3 players that all have interest in taking out the wall. Well, you got the problem that no one wants to go to Siege Tabor because, of course, they'll blow up the wall, and then the other 2 people hit all the worm spots, and then it's not actually helping them. They're only benefiting their position. I like that. I think it's a really cool kind of impasse that players get into. Obviously, if someone takes out the wall like round 5, this isn't even a problem. It's just a bum rush. But I do think those situations are interesting to kind of witness, and sometimes they're interesting to witness if you're the person who has no combat intention whatsoever, and kind of seeing where that goes. It's good if it mattered a lot of the time who goes Siege Tabor first, because the problem is, because there's so many intrigues, there's several intrigues that mean that someone can just basically wait out and say the last round, oh, I blow up the wall, I go to deep desert, I chuck in all the worms, and I win the game. That can feel kind of bad. You know, and especially if the wall is up, say, round 7, and if only one person has an intrigue to detonate the wall and no one else does, like, it kind of feels a formality. And I have seen a lot of games, and I've played a lot of games where even the game that Orski put up, which I was involved in, where I knew he had it, and it's like, well, the game's just over because, like, we can't go to Siege Tabor to stop him from detonating the wall, and we can't really go to these mining spots to stop him putting in worms because it doesn't matter. He just detonates the wall, and that's it. There's no kind of, there aren't games, like, how many games have you played where the wall existed the whole game?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Have you played
it's not very
have
many.
you played any?
I have. I played 2 games where the wall was up the entire game.
Out of 50 odd.
Out of 50ish.
That,
more than 50.
You know, and that's and the thing is, I don't even think that's that unusual. Now, your margin's going to vary whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing or not, you know, and the shield wall is there to be destroyed. Ultimately, like, in the end, you could argue, well, the alternative is to just not play with a shield wall, and obviously, you know, like, the shield wall is there is kind of like, it feels like a kind of safety net, but the problem is, because the shield wall is so easy to take out and so often is taken out, that you kind of have the issue that, like, if you're trying to play a game, for example, Imperium, and for whatever reason you haven't or not been able to get hold of hooks very much, and you're hoping the wall is going to stay up to keep you competitive, like, again, like, you can't even, like, go siege and block the wall getting detonated because it's very likely that someone's sitting around with an intrigue to blow up the wall. And then what's the point of you going to Siege Tabor? Or if someone just parks a spy down there and blows up the wall, and then what do you do? And that is a thing that it's an adjustment for us.
Yeah, I wish that they were more difficult to blow up shield wall intrigues. Like, the one that recalls a spy, it should say, like, recall a spy from the Siege Tabor location to do that. Actually, it shouldn't even be Siege Tabor. It should be somewhere else, like Arakeen, from a city location. Because, like, okay, so thematically what you're doing is you've set atomics, and you're going to blow a hole in the shield wall so that the storm and worms can come in. That's what you're doing. And that's what happens in the books. But, like, the thing here is you're going to Siege Tabor, which is not anywhere near it's not anywhere near the other locations where the shield wall is, really. And so shield wall is very large, right? It's a big rock formation that covers a lot of space on Dune. If you check out, like, the book maps and stuff, it's really big. And it's just meant to what it does is it protects, like, Imperial Basin, and I think even Haga Basin. It's like all of those are within the shield wall in the books, so it's a little bit thematically inappropriate that Haga Basin is outside the shield wall, but it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this game and this discussion. But anyway, protecting the cities makes sense thematically for the game and what's going on. But, like, from a gameplay perspective, the tension of going to Siege Tabor, let's just say, makes thematic sense, doesn't, but you go there and blow up the hole in the wall. That's great. That makes sense, because the dance around who's going to do it is significant. If the worm player has to contribute or send an agent to do that, then it makes sense that worms double things, because you've spent so much time doing this.
It's opportunity cost.
Yeah, opportunity cost. Yeah. But when the opportunity cost is, I just play this card, detonation, I dislike detonation. Like,
Yeah,
just dislike that card. It does two things. First, it blows up the wall. If the wall's blown up, it throws 4 troops in, or you can just throw 4 troops in. Like, very irritating to deal with because it's basically you're rarely going to have more than 4 troops in garrison. I've found you can have maybe 6, but rarely you're going to have more than 4 to throw in anyway because you're constantly having to go into conflict. But blowing up the wall for free feels like no opportunity cost. It's just free. Like, come on.
yeah,
Like,
you just do it.
2 spice, maybe a spice, maybe something,
Yeah,
maybe money. I don't know, some amount.
Yeah,
of something.
when it does feel like so as I mentioned, like kind of like when there is like you have this standoff between worm players of who's going to go to siege first. That's really cool when that legitimately happens and no one has any of these intrigues and they kind of get stuck in this standoff here. And there's like 3 of them. It's like good, the bad, and the ugly sort of thing. That's really cool,
yeah,
and I think that's a really fun moment of the game. But the problem is that it never really feels like the tension of who's going to blink first in regards to who's going to make that initial sacrifice and let all hell break loose. It's more a question of who's going to play their card first. Who's going to because it's so, and more importantly, it's a question of it's more who has the card because it's very likely at least one of them has it. And if only one of them has got it, it is such a crushing advantage to know that you can just wait it out and you can just chuck in the worms whenever you feel like. And like it's very difficult. It's very difficult for like a player to decide, well, I'm just gonna go to deep desert and spend my free water for 4 spice to block you on a card that you may or may not have. Like it's you can't really feasibly do that a lot of the time. And of course the problem is, well, let's say the players decide to do that for Deep Desert and Haga Basin. Well, if the game goes another round, you've got the same situation, except now they've spent all their resources. And so now when this person does play their card and gets their worms in, there's now no opposition, and they're just going to absolutely steamroll the next combat. So there's like kind of like when the tension is there, it's cool, but it feels a bit kind of fabricated, I think, at times.
Yeah, I agree.
And that is a slight issue that I do have. And again, I think the issue is that like when it's so easy to blow up the wall a lot of the time, and when combat rewards are doubled regardless of which one you take with worms, like everything to me in this game feels like it's just telling you go worms immediately and work the rest out from there.
Yeah, I will agree with that too.
Is that maybe a slight player skill thing because we're still getting used to the game? Perhaps. Is that just something we've got to accept as a different kind of flavor of game, and that it's much more about decisive combat and winning those? Maybe so. But is that something that you're going to actually prefer to base Dune Imperium? That's, I think, a much more complicated question to answer.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree. So generally, and I think this is a good way to dovetail into the discussion of the Intrigue deck, because the Intrigue deck is very different. But yeah, I'll just say that I think Unexpected Allies as a card, even though it's very strong, I think it's costed fine. I think 2 water to do that is fine. I like cards that have costs. I always will. Like, I like that most things in this game have costs that make sense. I think that there are a couple like Detonation. I know that these cards need to exist in some form, but I don't like free things. I know like people like free things in games, but this is a game where your resource accumulation needs to be turned into points in some way. You're either doing it through conflict, you're doing it by getting more resources to do other things like go up tracks or whatever. But if you're doing these things for free that are benefiting you, there needs to be some kind of counterplay to those things, but there isn't to stuff like Detonation.
Detonation,
it's a frustrating
it just
card,
happens, and that's it. The wall's gone, it's done, and there's no way. What would be interesting is if maybe there was a way of like stopping the wall blowing up. I don't know quite how you would maybe make that work. Maybe like have an intrigue or 2 dotted around, or maybe like some kind of some way to like have someone have a way to like if someone like plays a detonation icon that they have a way of stopping it. Because if it's someone that really doesn't want worms getting involved because it feels so inevitable the wall's going to get destroyed, maybe you try and find some way to allow someone to do something to stop it being blown up. And so, like, it takes a lot more effort for them to just... Because, again, yeah, just detonations, blow the wall, send worms in, and just get tons of resources. There's no way to prevent that. You can't stop them playing the intrigue. You can't stop them destroying the wall. So maybe that's something that could be explored in the future.
Well, I kind of wish, and I don't know if this was tried or not, but I kind of wish that they were tied to conflict cards and not plot cards, because if they were tied to conflict cards, you like play 3 swords and then the wall blows up. You're like, next conflict will be open. You know, it's like you can kind of plan for it in that way, something. But
interesting idea. Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't think I would have like a conflict card that lets you summon a worm and destroy the wall, sort of thing. Like unexpected allies, for example, as a conflict card seems completely insane. But it's an interesting way of maybe like tying them into that. Yeah,
but something that like it's a side effect of you play 3 swords and then the wall blows up. You're like, okay, if players had some sort of way to see it coming, those are the parts of the game that I find the most compelling, is when we can see things coming and try to figure out a way to prevent it or to prepare for it.
Yeah, you just want a chance to be able to do something about it, rather than, oh, it just happened and it's completely out of my control. That never feels great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about the intrigue deck. I'm tired of talking about conflicts. No, I think it's great.
We needed to talk. Combat's a massive part of this game and needed a big dive
it is.
In, but I do agree.
And just as a, you know, I love the way this game puts all that together. I just have some of these like little things I wish weren't the way they are, but you know, it is the way it is, and I will deal with it. That's me issue. But anyway, okay, let's talk about the intrigue deck. So we have 44 card intrigue deck. It's brand new. Nothing is the same as before, but you'll probably recognize some of the cards in part or parcel. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 conflict cards, combat cards, excuse me. 4 of those are, including the Chom modules, of course. I'm including everything here.
Yes.
4 of those are modular in that they have 2 different effects. Some of them have plots, and some of them have conflicts or combats. So we have these 13 cards. That's, I think, lower than in the base game. I don't remember if that's true. Maybe I'm completely wrong here. But
it definitely, at the very least, feels like it, because it should be noted as well is that while there are all those combat cards, several of them don't actually give you combat strength. Several of them take away from combat strength, or optionally give the chance. You know, reach agreement, go to ground, Spice's power optionally takes away troop, stuff like that. And impress as well is as much like getting hold of a card. Tactical option is retreat any number. So like, while maybe numbers wise it might be the same or about the same, in actual practicality it's probably like actually maybe effectively 10 or 11 cards. And that's something that I mentioned earlier. The combat cards definitely feel to me like there's a lot less swords available. So I feel like combats are one a lot more about just sheer weight of volume you managed to chuck in. A lot.
I like I want to say, as a very positive thing, I think there are more viable ways to retreat your troops in this game, which I think are really cool. And I see them played a lot. So go to ground, which retreat 1 or 2 of your troops for a spy. I think that's a great card. I think it's really fun to play, and people can either see it coming or not, but when you retreat and get a spy, you're like, oh, I see what you're planning on doing now, because the spy kind of gives you an indication of what the next round is going to look like. So that's cool. Or you might just retreat some troops so that you can spring the trap or something like that. So those are cool. I like tactical option
is nasty.
It's nasty. Like, retreating any number of your troops is insane, and I love it. I think this is a great card. I wish there was a way, you know, just as a base option, that you could retreat your troops. Like, you know how we got the atomics token. I wish there was like a token that everyone had that once per game they can just retreat their troops.
So
I think that would create an interesting.
So what you're saying is everyone should just play as Amber Metelli. I
love Amber. I love Amber Metelli.
We'll talk about her obviously a little bit later on, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think that the interesting thing, the dynamic of retreating, is really cool in this game, and I love it. I love that addition. I like that they leaned into that and made a little bit more of a payoff for those things. So, you know, there's some cards that come up in the Imperium deck, specifically Chani is so strong that lets you retreat troops and maintain your strength. Really cool card. Anyway, and a couple
Intrigues.
others we'll get to, but anyway, intrigues. Contingency plan is an interesting combat plot card that has either gives you 2 Solari or 3 combat strength. I like these modular cards in concept, but what I find is that people are more likely to play the contingency plans for the money as opposed to
Especially
the combat,
early.
especially early, and that means that you don't see them quite as much played for that, which leads into these conflicts feeling less like bids. Like they used to feel like a bid when you're bidding troops and then you're upping the bid, then you're upping the bid like that.
Unless someone goes Hardy Warriors, in which case I'm just winning this conflict. Thank you very much.
Sure,
but
sure.
I know what you mean.
Well, not always, but yeah, it's most of the time. But now it feels more like there just aren't enough low-level conflict cards to do that with. And because people are going to be choosing the more viable option early on, most early conflicts just feel like, I win, you get second, I get third, there's no conflict cards played, I win, you get second. It just feels like there's no conflict cards played. And so it feels a little bit less I don't know, less dynamic. And that's...
I mean, people like knock it, but like those tiebreakers or master tacticians and that sort of thing, like you do see them every now and again. In even cards like the Dreadnought one, push them back, stuff like that. You used to see them get played quite a lot in like the opening like 2 or 3 rounds, but you definitely don't see that very often because if they're combat cards, they're usually pretty meaty ones like Spring the Trap or Questionable Methods. Devour obviously is good, but you want to have Sandworms, so that tends to not get played. Backed by Cho'um, you need 2 contracts. How quickly you're going to get those? That's a problem. Weird in Combat is an interesting one. It's 3 swords, which is good. But if you can get 3 Persuasion with the Bene Gesserit, it's another +2 swords. But that, whether you go to that effort or not. But yeah, it definitely is just like there's just less. To me, there's just less swords. So it becomes a lot
less
more
early game. Less early game swords. I mean, there's lots of end game swords like Spring the Trap. You're saying like Spring the Trap,
or your deck.
Spice's Power, or your deck or whatever, or Weird in Combat. All of these, and even Questionable Methods. These things all lean into later gameplay cards. Yeah, which I don't know why that was chosen. I mean, it's an interesting idea. Even the Backed by Cho'um, you have 2 or more contracts. That's not even a combat card until later. And then you're like, okay, so am I going to play Weird in Combat now for 3?
And sometimes it's just not a combat card because you just don't go contracts, So
for Backed by Cho'um, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That does sometimes happen. Like you just don't go contracts because there's nothing up there that really suits you. And you pull this card and it's like, okay, I'm kind of struggling for faction access. What am I meant to do here?
Yeah, I kind of wish that Backed by Cho'um or a card like it that just said if you had 2 or more contracts 4. Or 2, like 2 or 4
or +2, something like that. Something like Devour. Devour is like, I like the idea of Devour. It's 2 swords anyways, but if you've got a Sandworm, it's a little bit extra strength, and it gives you the trash as well. It's kind of like almost like a really mini like Shai Halud in a way.
Yeah, that one's all right.
Stuff like that. That's kind of cool because it's like it's never leaving you in a position where like neither option is good. And the Backed by Cho'um is definitely a card that sometimes you draw it and you just can't do either of them. And it just gets stuck there. That is a no one.
I kind of think it would be better if there were more Backed by Cho'um cards, like things that if you knew there were more cards in the Intrigue deck that revolved around contracts.
Oh yeah.
Then you'd be like, I gotta get contracts, and like I have an out, But like the way when there's one in the deck, especially for conflicts, this feels like you either rando draw into it and it works for you, or you're probably going to use it for the money, and it just doesn't. I don't know. It's a weird. But the
problem
card.
is, do you use it for the money? Like dropping a faction buff is pretty. That can be pretty bad in this game because faction access is hard to get.
It is, but I think for Solari early on, if it means getting round 2 Swordmaster, I would.
Definitely.
100% of the time.
For the early game, I do agree. All right, fair enough.
Yeah,
that's a sacrifice people are willing to make, and I do see that from time to time.
So like just analyzing this Intrigue deck, and I'm going to be putting up an image on the screen for everybody, which you already probably can see, of all of the conflict cards we're talking about right now, so you know what exactly we're talking about. But I think that's interesting. Some of these choices in design, Questionable Methods, I think is a really cool card. That one, I like this design a lot. It's like it's 1 sword or 4 more. I like this. This is really cool. That's a hard decision to make. Do you go down with a faction to just win a combat? Because 5 swords is usually winning a conflict. Usually.
It's basically it's blackmail, but you have the choice of just taking one of those swords for free.
Yeah, I
Which is
like
an
it.
interesting little dynamic choice. Yeah, I do agree.
Cards that I'm a little bit like, I like Find the Weakness. I think Find the Weakness is fine as well. Same kind of thing. Like I like these ones that have some costs associated with them, but they're not super
You're not
strong.
and they're not obligatory. Like, yeah, just
Right.
take 2 swords. Sometimes it's just better.
Yeah, Spice's Power, 3 spice for 6 swords. Like that seems pretty good until you look at Spring the Trap, which is
Yeah.
two spies for 7 power. Like I don't know where
Spring the
they get
Trap
these.
is
What is the equation? What is the equation for Spring the Trap having 7 spices power? 3 spice is so hard to get in this game.
I
Like
mean,
I've
I
seen.
think that values a spy at like nearly 2 spice, technically speaking. If you want to go down that route, it's pretty insane. I mean, to be fair, it's not
That's
always
not
easy to get
true at
those two
all. No way.
spies. It's not. No, I'm joking. It's kind of weird. So Spring the Trap is interesting because obviously that as a card is significantly better for some leaders than others because some leaders
Yeah.
just have inherent spy generation. So it's
Yep.
interesting that, but it is also like 7 swords. That is, it's like the old Allied Armada, except you don't need an alliance. You just need 2 spies. So.
Yep. Yep.
It's very big. It's a huge card if you find that. Sometimes it's not always the easiest to get spies going because people just keep just spamming espionage any chance they get, and if you don't find cards that give you spies, or you're not a leader that generates spies, that can get a bit stuck over the course of time, and that can make life a bit difficult. But there are plenty enough cards out there from the Imperium. Like if you get this early enough, like even if you're not generating any spies, you can try to tweak your strategy. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well maybe I should go espionage first
A
next
couple
round.
times. Yeah.
Just to get that. Maybe I should pick up covert operation from the deck just so it gives you that passive spy generation so I can use and stuff like that, which I think is cool, and I
It
like
is
that
cool.
that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of Spring the Trap. I just kind of, okay, there's good things about these. I really like the conflict cards overall, and I like the design of most of them. I think Spring the Trap is also really interesting because there's that one conflict that has you pull 2 spies to get another point.
The
That's one.
Arakeen tier 3.
Yeah, I like that one too. I like the ones that force you into weird situations. Also, I like that one can't be duplicated by Worm. It's really annoying that other ones can be, but I really like that can't be. This one, I like that you basically commit. Like if you had that conflict and Spring the Trap in hand, it's a little awkward.
Yeah,
Which I like that tension. Yeah, I like that.
Good, though. It's good.
It is good. No, it's good. I would say that because of the strength of spies, and by the way, spies are very, very good in this game. You should always go for getting them. If you don't, you're going to run into problems like people who do and just draw Spring the Trap. Or if you don't do it and you draw Spring the Trap, it's a blank. That feels a little bad. So just go for spies. That said, I want to say Spice's Power does not feel like that. It feels like I'm going to retreat my troops and get some spies. That's mostly what I see people doing with Spice's Power.
Yeah,
because spice is so hard to get.
Yeah, the free spice for 6. Like basically, if you're playing that, it's to win the game.
It's got to win the game.
It's basically you're playing it to win the game. But yeah, it's also insane. Like if you pull that in theory, you could go to Arakeen and generate 3 spies from there in theory. And like and how does anyone prepare for you playing that? It's kind of one of the things. So negotiate withdrawal from base game is interesting as a card because obviously you can retreat your troops you put in to get the influence bump. But people know that it's in your deck. You can't hide. You can't say, negotiate withdrawal. I never got that. The green player went and bought. Like they know you've got that card. So while it might be somewhat random when you've got that ability to do it, they know that you possess it. Obviously, this is an intrigue. Like no one knows it's out there. And so you could easily just go to like Arakeen or Research Station. Like if someone like is considering, you could easily go like Research Station, for example, and barrel in a bucket of troops, force someone to commit tons of resources. You just go, I just got Spiceless Power. And that can feel
cool. It can feel weird, but if the other person's still winning and you're getting nothing, it's fine. But I'd say the weird thing about it is that this goes into that issue of there aren't that many conflict cards, or it feels like there aren't, because most of the time I'm seeing these played for the resource costs because resources are so tight.
Valuable,
and that's what's kind of a little weird. Is like I guess they thought you can get a lot of spice all the time, but I'll tell you what. Usually, and I'd say maybe 50 to 60% of the games I play, this is just some like random number I'm generating. One person gets 7 spice round 3 or 4. I think it's round 4.
From Deep Desert.
From Deep Desert. And the rest of the players have a lot of trouble getting spice for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
one person will hit up Haga Basin, and you'll get some spice from
And especially once the worm
Imperial.
spam begins, because the spice just never builds up. The
Yeah.
only option alternative you have that is like when Staban, if he can start spying up, especially Haga Basin. I've played a few Staban games. I know we're getting to leaders, but just to make it
That's
like
okay.
and you just spy up the like deep desert, and especially Haga Basin. Or I even had a game I was doing with Haga Basin and Imperial Basin because Lady Jessica was in it, and I was just generating like 2 spies passively basically every single round, and that's a way of getting around it. But outside of like specific situations, yeah, like someone gets a big massive spice dump like round 3, maybe round 4, but other than that, a lot of the spice is generating is typically coming from conflicts because it never really builds up very much. Or maybe late game you have some people that will go like shipping and then high council revisiting and use that as some interesting passive spice generation. That can happen from time to time. Other than that, you're basically looking at your deck. You're looking at like bonds with like Northern Watermaster, and stuff like that. Which again, getting onto it, but basically what I'm trying to say is I agree. That's the TLDR.
Yeah,
I
for
I,
sure.
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, but that's just talking about the conflicts. Let's take a look
That's
at some
not
of the
yeah.
plot cards here. The plot cards are also pretty interesting.
I think they're pretty
So
good on the
I
whole.
think they are
Actually,
pretty good. Yeah,
I
I
think they're
actually
generally
say
pretty
like
strong.
besides detonation, which I have some
We've
issues
talked
with,
about yeah.
I generally like what they've done with the Intrigue deck. I think it's really great. I like that the cards that give influence bumps cost something. You know, I mean, even if you consider Siege Ritual, which is a discard for either a Fremen or
It's
Bene
kind
Gesserit
of
bump,
free, isn't
it's
it? It's
kind
kind
of
of free.
free. Yeah, it's kind of free. And there's also a couple of cards in the game that interact with discard. I think there's only 2, honestly, but weird sort of number in a 71 card deck. Isn't that right? 71 card deck.
72.
71, 72? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a weird thing that usually doesn't come up, but you could definitely trigger that with your Spacing Guild's favor for get two more spice. Not really sure the interaction of that and why Siege Ritual leads to Spacing Guild benefits, but whatever. It's interesting. I like the idea. It is definitely, if they're going to add more discard cards, then it makes a lot of sense.
I think it's probably a slight carryover from like Rise of Ix Immortality, where there was a lot of obviously with unload effects, and I
Yeah.
think this is probably a slight reaction to that. That maybe there was a lot of unloading going on at some point, so this was kind of like, okay, we probably need to scale that back just a little bit, and I suspect that's kind of where we've arrived at where we are. And maybe there
Fair,
could have been
yeah.
done with a slight more, and we'll talk about the deck and like Spacing Guild stuff in a moment, but it does feel like when you think there's a lot of cards that have unload effects in that sort of game, it feels like this is an adjustment because of that.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, Siege Ritual, kind of free. Imperium Politics has a cost of 1 Solari to get either a Spacing Guild or
Kind of
Emperor bump.
free.
Kind of free.
It's kind of
Like,
free.
these things are interesting. I like things about these. I like that they are 2 cards and not 4 in the deck, but I also kind of don't like that they're 2 cards and not 4 in the deck. In the base game, we had 1 for each faction, and they were free, right? Those were always a little bit frustrating when people drew them at the right time. But the thing about them was you drew 1 faction, you might not draw the faction you needed, so they could be blanks, which I think is fair if you draw a free influence. But like here, they're condensed down into 2, so you have options. I
There
like the
almost always is
options.
some degree of utility. Yeah,
There's
I
always
agree with that.
utility, yeah. So I like that there's always utility. I also kind of like am a little sad that there are only 2, which means that we've got all these other effects crammed into the deck. We have a lot of duplicate effects.
We do
And
obviously have like buy access, for example, which is basically pay for your own machinations and change allegiance and stuff like that. But there isn't a ton. No, I do agree. In fact,
yeah,
it feels like sometimes there's as many that let you drop bumps that as much as that give you bumps, which is kind
yeah,
of weird.
it is weird. I mean, it's kind of cool. I like that. There's opportunism, which you go down to influence and pay to Solari,
Nasty,
which is
nasty card that.
really nasty card. This is almost a free point. I would say that most of the time this is a free point. It might cost you an action. You have to go back to a space to get your friendship or something again. But
They're still good
opportunism is
spaces,
nasty.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so good because it lets you go below the threshold for an alliance and then go back up
Yeah.
and get the bonus
Yeah,
again. So,
or you can
oof,
proxy fight for an alliance, force someone to have to defend. Like, oh, I just use opportunism. Same with
yeah.
Shadow Alliance, same
And you
idea.
have Shadow Alliance with it, yeah.
That can be kind of frustrating
Yeah.
occasionally going through this.
So that's an interesting thing that is costed strangely to me. But I think it's fine. Like I like these cards that are imbalanced in this way. That sometimes they're bad for you and sometimes they're just totally fine for you. Yeah, we had this buy access card, which is 5 Solari for choose 2 bumps. Massive card. Like this can be just
enormous,
a massive
enormous.
card.
It's you think in original in Rise of Ix, there's a combat you have to fight
Yeah.
for to get this reward, and it's just pay 5 Solari. 5 Solari. Just go Spice Refinery. That's your shipping. Turn shipping into free bumps. Merry Christmas, stuff like that. It's very very
It's
That's a
very
massive
good.
card.
It's also
Especially
weird.
in a game where faction access is a much more of a premium again, like huge, absolutely enormous.
Yeah, it's also weird that buy access is in this game when propaganda, the conflict, is also in this game.
Yeah, kind
Um,
of agree.
I just gotta say that might be too many choose twos, like for influence bumps. Like plus you can double that one, so like it's weird. It's weird. There's a lot of bumps. I noticed there's probably more influence bumps overall in the Intrigue deck than in the base game. I mean, there's more ways to go big.
Probably percentage-wise, you might be right. I mean, the thing is, obviously, we're back down to a smaller. We're used to having an Intrigue deck that's like 70 cards, and now we're back down to 44. So, like, if you've got, say, 5 cards here and then 7 cards in one, it feels like there's more here because you just see them a lot more regularly.
No, I guess I'm probably wrong here because in the base game they had one of each faction. They had bribery.
Finesse.
Was there another one? No, finesse is not base game. Was
really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Demand respect, I guess.
Demand
respect. You want to call it that?
Yep. Demand respect. Everyone's favorite. So yeah, it feels like I guess we have less influence bumps overall with higher costs, which I think is good. I like Change Allegiances. I think Change Allegiances is a phenomenal card. A really cool design too, because you have a finesse card, but then it can also just be an extra bump for 3 spice, and I think that is well costed.
Which is expensive. You feel 3 spice for a bump is very pricey. So it's all about the opportunity cost. It's kind of like it's basically a convincing argument. Or shifting allegiances, I should say, except it's in your hand and it costs an extra spice, is kind of what it's trying to do. It's saying, all right, you can use this to steal this alliance, but it's going to cost you. But the advantage is you can do it whenever the hell you want. So I kind of like the idea of, and that definitely feels like that's definitely the case with some of these cards. It feels like they've taken Asian effects or effects from the previous game and then incorporated them into an actual plot effect. Manipulate is the obvious example. That is basically word for word Helena's ring. It's now just an intrigue.
It's now just a plot card, which is fine. I kind of think that's cool. There's a Inspire Awe as well. There's a couple of these that give you persuasion, but this one is acquire a card that costs 3 or less. Actually, quite limited in Uprising because most of the cards that you would love to acquire are a little higher. This one's fine. I think it's quite good. But the one thing I really miss that one card says 2 persuasion. I miss that card so much.
Yeah, charisma.
Like, charisma.
It's just nice to have it. It's just nice and simple. You've got it, rock and roll. Very nice. Yeah. I do agree. One thing I will say though for the Intrigue deck as a whole. So let me ask you a question. Going back to like Ixo and that sort of thing. What would you say are some of the quote weakest Intrigue cards unquote from Iximo?
Distraction. Okay. Distraction's probably not distraction. I'm sorry. Diversion, whatever. That's the same
Secret
meaning
forces,
essentially.
That Secret sort forces, of things, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think those ones are kind of the weakest. Maybe
they're very situational, right?
Yeah, the ones that give you troops or whatever for having the High Council. Those ones generally weaker. I would say that in this game, there's one that's similar, Counselor's Ambition. That if you have a high council seat, you get 2 water, which is a better reward.
Oh yeah, that is huge.
That's a better reward.
The amount of times to see people like spring that to like get a surprise details, I actually think
great.
That's very, very, and it's worth noting. Yep. It is the only Intrigue card in the entire deck that gives you water. The only one. So it's something you've got to watch it. If you're trying to hostage Great Flats, Deep Desert's Fate, and someone makes like a weird High Council move,
You got to
You
be
want to
careful.
keep an eye out for that because
Yep.
that could be coming, and I've done that
Love
with other
it.
people. That could be really,
Oh,
really nasty.
I
But the
love
point,
that. Yeah, it's fun.
but the point I'm trying to make here is, so when you think about like obviously in the old deck and compare it to this one, what would you say is like the weakest cards of XMO feel a lot worse than say what might be regarded as some of the weaker cards in this? I think every single card in this deck has some decent use. I wouldn't say there's any that are like really bad.
I would say
Even some of
leverage
like
is very bad. Leverage is probably the worst
leverage
card.
is the exception. I think that isn't great. That is the one exception I will make. But outside of that, I think they all have got some interesting. You know, Shaddam's favor for the troop or free Solari for free Emperor influence. If you draw that early, that could win you conflicts. You know, I've had that and be able to win like round 2 conflict just because I had Shaddam's favor and everyone heavy the first round because it was like the money fight. You know, okay, I'll just pick up that as an intrigue sort of thing, and that gets you through. That also pays for like Imperial Favor, for example. Call to Arms is an interesting one. You know, that I think Call to Arms is really nice because it gives you an interesting reason to buy maybe a couple of cards from the Imperium Road that you might not otherwise, because it lets you garrison them up for the future. So that could be kind of cool stuff like that. I just don't feel outside leverage it outside. I don't feel like there's any intrigue cards that I would say are bad. There's some that maybe you can draw at the wrong time and doesn't really do a lot for you. Troan Prophets can be one that can be a bit awkward because, like, yeah, we'll get to the contracts later. Well, I really think contracts are good, but that one can kind of like I feel like I've really got to get into that, and it might not benefit me too much. And it can be sometimes people just going for that and they pick up, like, oh, okay, well that's just like kind of a 3-point sort of thing sometimes. But it feels a lot less uneven. I'd go with the other stretch of it. You think to like where plans within plans, especially, and Call the Market got to in XMO. There is nothing. I don't feel it's anything close to that in Uprising. There is one intrigue card that has been raised to me once or twice, and that is strategic stockpiling, which probably is worth noting. This is the one that lets you spend 5 spice for a point, or free water for a point if you've got free feminine influence. This can be pretty game changing, but it does require a fair amount of setup, and it's also, if you're spending 5 spice for a point, it's 5 spice you're not spending on anything else.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about that card.
While it's big, I don't think it's not like 3 points. It's still a fairly significant cost, and especially getting that free water for free influence, like that could be really difficult to get hold of, if not sometimes feels almost impossible.
Yeah, I like that this card exists. I've come around on it. I initially really disliked it for the reason
I think a lot of people were a bit unsure about it.
I think the costs are fine. My issue with it had been previously that it's one card that gives you 2 points. A plot card that gives you potentially 2 points is like, that's game winning. Like it's the easiest single action 2 points you can have.
And it's not to say that it's not a game winner. This card can be a game winner, no question about that.
And most of the time it's a game winner, or it's sitting in your hand and you just can't do it. There's not much. I don't think there's been a situation where I've seen someone play this card and then lose. I think if they get to play it, they usually win the game. I'd also say that
they're already like way behind in the game, and they haven't got much else to do.
And they haven't got anything going on.
But they've got the spice. Oh, okay, well, it's 5 spice for a point. Make it a bit more respectable.
Right. So I think it's a cool card. Again, with we were talking about the worm issue earlier. One of the reasons I dislike the card is because most of the conflicts you want to go into with worms are ones that give you spice or water, and some of them will give you 2 water, which you could double, which pays for 1 strategic stockpiling.
And of course, if you've got worms, you've already got 2 influence of the Fremen. Pretty easy to get that.
It's easy to get that,
and it feeds into, as you said earlier, this rich get richer sort of mentality that can kind of creep in every now and again. And that's
and I've seen that happen where like somebody won a conflict, or somebody played strategic stockpiling and then ended up winning the conflict with their worms anyway, doubling their rewards, and they just had like 12 points and everyone else is at like 5.
Yeah, and it's just like it's not even a contest.
Feels
sort of
bad.
That happen.
So I'd say like I like the idea, and I think these are well costed cards. And again, this comes back to my sort of like reticence to fully endorse the combat worms situation, the doubling effect. But I'd say if we took that out, all of these things are perfectly fine, and I love the way that they're costed. Again, we've talked about detonation, how I don't like that card just because I think it's free. I think free is too good, especially if it's something that's so game changing.
We should probably talk about the end games actually.
Let's talk about the end games.
I think there's a lot to talk about here actually.
These are really interesting end games. I like these. I like all of these end games. So basically you have Ornithopter, Desert Mouse, and Chris Knife, which pair with their respective colored battle icons.
Or propaganda if you want it.
Right, or propaganda, which is the question mark one. And as to note, we haven't really mentioned this, but propaganda is a question mark conflict that cannot immediately pair with another conflict card or icon. You have to wait till the end game, so it can't trigger the end of the game, which I think is really interesting.
To start with, I thought it was just
I don't think anyone
whatever. Did. Yeah,
it's in the notes. Yeah, it's in the end of the.
It is noted, but it's not immediately clear. I imagine most people first game they play it's like, oh, I just pair it with my sword, and that's a point. No, it's end game. Yeah, that was. Yeah. Could have been better detail, but never mind.
Yeah. So anyway, I like that. I like those a lot. I mean, it's nice to have the effect that you can satisfy your flipped cards. That's cool. I don't have a problem with that.
Spice is not the worst sometimes. I mean, it's better than a kick in the teeth. And obviously there are going to be times where you're going to get those symbols, but you just don't have them and they don't turn up. That loose spice that gets you espionage, that pays for some shipping. Yep. That enables you to do other card effects, that sort of thing. So I think that it's not. It doesn't look like much, but that can get you out of some pinches.
It absolutely could. And because spice, again, is hard to come by, you might find yourself with 4 spice, needing 1 more to go to highliner, or just 1 spice for, as you mentioned, espionage. It's an espionage trip. Like, those things are really cool. I like that. This cool cost. Good opportunity effect for these cards. Shadow Alliance.
Here we go. I am obviously predisposed to like this, except it's actually kicked my ass twice.
So yeah, interesting card. I like the effect. I like that this effect is in the game. It plays very well with opportunism. To the point that it can get a little annoying. And if you've ever run into this situation, someone with opportunism and Shadow Alliance, that's 2 free points. Especially if you ran the gauntlet and went all the way up the track, somebody got right behind you. You can just like donate a point to them for 2 points. It's like, oof, that's rough.
Yeah, it feels like Shadow Alliance as well is an interesting one. So this fun of this came up. I mentioned about one of the games that Orski put up on his channel recently. I was involved with. One of the really horrible things about Shadow Alliance is when you're pretty sure someone's got it, and they're just like lingering around your alliance. It's like, well, what do you do? It feels like kind of a lose-lose situation. So yeah, the Shadow Alliance is pretty neat. I like its idea, but yeah, in the game, which was uploaded recently, there was a situation where it was me and him and someone else, and was making like a really big deal of like, oh, I could go free for alliance, what should I go for? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, he's almost certainly got Shadow Alliance or like opportunism or something, and that can feel kind of grubby a little bit because it's like, well, you kind of get stuck in a lose-lose situation where you feel like you have to defend your alliance, but you're not gaining anything from doing it, or you don't defend the alliance and you just lose the point either way. I guess that's kind of the way the card is designed a little bit, but that can feel kind of nasty, especially when you're pre-convinced someone's got it, and especially if like you've gone in a game and you've cycled through a lot of intrigues. It means the likelihood that this turning up is, and you do notice it sometimes. It gives, I like that it gives the opportunity for someone to like make. I don't know. It's kind of weird. So Shadow Alliance has 2 features. Either it's a card that you can draw, so it's like, okay, you lost the alliance, someone stole it from you, but you still get the point. But the other side is it allows people, just to proxy fight you on an alliance and just put you in like a really horrible situation where you kind of like. You're kind of stuck with knowing what really to do, and both options feel kind of bad. That's the only issue with Shadow Alliance.
Yeah, I think it's a cool card, though. I think, honestly, like, I like these end games a lot more than the end games in base game or even Ix Immortality. I think there are just too many in Ix and Immortality, and some of them, if you're playing both of them, Ix and Immortality,
some of them had
2 cards
not
are the
aged
same.
well over the expansions. Hence, plans within plans, especially like that in XMO just feels like a lot of the time it's at least a 3 point. If
but conversely,
if the game
I think
goes
it would be
8
great
rounds,
here.
it's like 2 points.
Yeah, I actually think that, and I did this in the latest Canly. I actually gave people options of end games, and they and one of them was Plans Within Plans, and we only got the first point from it, one player. So like I think it's a reasonable, I think it's a reasonable end game, honestly, but it's just very hard in Ix and Immo to not get both points from it. You're just going up so many tracks and things are just skyrocketing. But
yeah,
again, like Uprising's a slower game. There are fewer access cards that you'll be picking up from the Imperium row. There are fewer cards generally that give you faction bumps. You know, there's only 4 here.
Is secure spice trade? Sorry, go on with Shadow Alliance. Sorry, you're still going. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I think Shadow Alliance is a pretty cool card. I think it's fair, and I like the way it does. You know, if you have it and you're pushing a faction, and somebody's like defending, you're like, haha. Like I like that feeling of power
it's
in this
nice
game.
it's nice to be the person with the card.
Yeah.
But if you're the person that is on the other side of that and you're very sure they've got that card, that's not great.
I agree.
And that is a little bit icky. I was gonna say, so is secure spice trade what corner market should always have been?
Yeah, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Probably.
It's interesting actually because I secure spice trade like it's a different economy, I guess. It's not easy to get 2 spice plus flows in this game because a lot of your efforts I find get like sucked into combat, and so that can like make getting hold of multiple spice plus flows sometimes pretty difficult.
I think it depends on your draft what leaders you get. Like if you end up with Irulan or like a Paul or
even
Muad'Dib, yeah, even Gurney, you're fine. And if you get a couple of like 2 cost good or 2 persuasion good cards like from the Imperium bro, you're good. It does get a little bit tricky at times because there are a lot of cards. I think there are more cards in this game than before that have like no persuasion or lower persuasion. Most of these cards are going to be 1 persuasion unless you're just going for Prepare the Ways or something like that. And I think that's reasonable. Like I think that the persuasion being lower is a cool thing. So yeah, I think it's a pretty well balanced. I think secure spice trade is cool. Honestly, it's not as exciting as corner of the market. I think that corner of the market is like I can get a point, but if I do this other thing, you know, that those are always fun aspects of the game. And I definitely think that if corner of the market was in this game, it might be okay. Like I think corner of the market would be okay. Now it's interesting that we have these kind of like balanced versions of these cards from the base game. But I think if you just like imported those instead of these, I think it'd be okay because it is hard to get 2 spice must flows. Like in base game Immortality, or not the base game Dune Imperium, it was hard to get 2 spice must flows. You had to work for it. So I feel like that feels right. I don't mind this card so much. It's just not that exciting. Honestly, it's not that exciting.
No, it is. But I guess the argument is that
fine.
when you sacrifice some of the potential power it had, and again, this is the problem. Like, this is why I'm trying to compare this to like base game because XMO is a different beast. Like XMO and Uprising are 2 very different branches of the same tree. And so I think it's that's gonna be the natural comparison for a lot of people, like for us and people listening to this. I'm trying to avoid it where possible because I don't think it's the most accurate comparison personally.
I do agree. Yeah, I agree. I think it's closer to base. So like in that case, I think that there's some really cool things that have been done in the Intrigue deck. Like I like the plot cards a lot overall. Like Distraction's really cool. Deploying 3 troops and getting a spy, and you can put it anywhere. Yeah. That's super sweet. Like this is a sweet card.
Some of them are really cool. Some of it Mercenaries is
sweet.
Mercenaries is very strong because you're also recycling the Intrigue as well at the very least, which is very good stuff like that. But even some of the kind of slightly weird one, again, cool ones I've mentioned, Inspire Raw can be pretty juicy. Depart for Arrakis is just a straightforward, just pumping a load of dudes. Depart for Arrakis is very strong, I think. For 2 spice,
agreed.
I think that's very strong. And then some other interesting kind of weird sort of cards. Cunning. You know, do you pay a spice to get the trash along with the card draw? Sometimes maybe that's a bit expensive. Spice basically for a card for a trash is not cheap, you know. And there's a few of them where like you can get some good rewards, but it comes at a fair cost though as well.
Yeah, agreed.
But that's probably good. But yeah, leverage is like kind of meh. But other than that, I think they're all at least fine. And I do find in this game, like, you know, if you decide you want to just like start barreling secrets and assembly hall early, like that can pay a lot of dividends later on. And it doesn't feel as bad. Whereas like in some other games, like it feels a much more of a crapshoot. I feel like it's a more consistent sort of strength deck. Obviously some are like way better than others, and some are situational, but it never feels like going assembly hall like first round. There's no intrigue that feels bad, sort of thing.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Maybe like the ones that require contracts to be really good feel a
But at
little
least
weird,
if you're
but
gonna get that, get it immediately. You know, if you're gonna get
yeah.
Cho and Profits is the only one I'm also unsure about because like 4 or more contracts is quite a task. Like
Yeah, it is.
that is a commit. And the thing is, you've also got to gain those contracts. So it's either hitting accept contract, dutiful service, which is not a popular space, you know, or like you get some in Monk's conflicts, which there are a couple, not many. There's a couple of conflicts that give those contracts, but then you've got to fulfill them as well. We'll talk about contracts in a moment, which I do like overall. But Show and Profits is like, if there's ever a card I see get trashed a lot of Imperial Privilege, it's Show and Profits a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
I think we can wrap up the intrigue deck. I think it's quite good. I like what's in here. I kind of wish there were a little bit more conflict cards personally, but I think that there's a good many, and there's good variety too. I like the modular cards, and on the whole, like I think this power level is much higher, and I think that's a good thing for the game. Like I think if you are someone who liked Dune Imperium, but sometimes felt like your intrigues were a little bit like sus, you probably would like this one better because they're just a lot more high power cards. Even like Manipulate's very strong. Like getting to set aside a card that someone else might get is nice. Inspire Awe is maybe one of the weaker ones. Though if you do have a conflict card, like putting a 3-cost card in your hand can be pretty huge.
Yeah, there's some very. We'll talk about the Imperial deck a little bit down, but there are some obviously very strong cards you can get for free fetch for their reveals. You know, Beast Spoils is 2 swords. Shishakli can give you like some Fremen bonds. Cankles of Power can give you 3 swords.
Shishakli's 4 though.
Sort of things. Yeah, I mean, there's a few bits, but there's some decent free costers. We'll talk about that in a short bit. But
right.
yeah, that can be pretty nasty.
Let's talk about contracts real fast. So I mean I don't have a whole lot to say about contracts. I think they're a very simple mechanism. Basically, you collect the contract from a contract space, and then when you go to the space on the contract, you get a reward. Like that's fine. I don't have any problems with them. I think they're super fun. Like I don't know. Like we've already mentioned that you should just be playing with them from
it should be
the first.
Mandatory, 100%. You should just have this. I get the idea of like giving the option to not make them mandatory, but when it's like coming at the cost of some kind, and especially you've got a leader you can't use if you don't use it, you should just have this in every game. There's no reason not to.
I actually think that the base effect of 2 Solari that's on I can't remember the name of
the space sort of thing. Yeah.
The space for the Emperor.
Yeah.
Right. That I actually think that makes that space significantly better.
I think
it's
so.
just really strange. Yeah, I think because the best everyone says that the best contracts are the ones that are not tied to spaces. They're the one that's the immediate to Solari.
If there's one immediate
is the best one,
and you've got like some that are harvest, but you still got to go to one of the spaces. The immediate one is very popular, but again, this is like I think people are very used. This is coming from a very Imo bit background where people just bum rush Solari immediately any chance they get. They'll double smuggle for Solari. They'll bum rush round 1 conflict if there's money. People will jam wealth, stuff like that. I think that's kind of like it's a bit of that mentality crossing over. I'm not saying that they're not good by any stretch of imagination, but like if a set contract was like 2 Solari and a card draw, like you would see that get played almost every single round. Like almost every game, but I think what we're but it's not to say that Chome contracts are weak by any stretch of imagination. I think what to me the contracts do, I think it's kind of emblematic of like the extra layer of polish that I think Uprising has had received as well. It's a very cute way of offering rewards to players to go to spaces they might not do otherwise. It again from playing a lot of XMO, we can get very ingrained on ourselves of taking these very particular routes, you know, of like of pathing of what we want to talk to do. I think contracts is a nice way of trying to freshen that up and giving some divergence to that and offering the players and giving them some kind of neat little rewards, you know, like all right then. Like, for example, Spice Refinery. Go there. All right, you want to do the enemies for that, but, you know, get a water for doing that. You know, that's pretty nice. You know, High Council, getting it for cheap. Espionage, picking up free Solari where you go there. That might not be a space you go to often because you're not really interested in the card draw, but, you know, the money on top, you know, that can be pretty nice. I think it's good for the game overall. It just encourages people to kind of do little bits and pieces. You know, it's just a nice addition. It's not that complicated. It's fairly self-explanatory. There's a little bit of gaming to it, maybe of what is better and weaker. We're not really getting into too much of like the power strength levels of it necessarily, because I don't think that's particularly relevant. I just think the concept of it existing, it just makes for a more dynamic board. And if it means that someone has a reason to just stop spamming the same space again and again and again, or maybe make someone, and it also there's the interest by play. So for example, like if say you've got someone's got the Arakeen for the troop and the spy contract, for example, well, that's obviously really good for them. But what it can end up doing, like say if like say Gurney Halleck's got that, well, what might happen is that other players might say and think, oh, well, maybe what I should do, rather than going to this place I was intending to go to anyways, maybe I should go to Arakeen first. Maybe I should stop them from cashing in that contract because it's very good for them. And I think that's good. You know, again, it's encouraging people to kind of go out of their comfort zone a little bit. And it forces more interaction. You know, deliver supplies, for example. Obviously, it's a good spot, and people like the water. But if you know it's going to give them water and free Solari, and it's going to give them access to Swordmaster because of that, well, maybe you might decide to go there first. Maybe that water's not immediately useful for you right now, but the bump's going to be good, and that water's going to help you pick up some spice. Maybe you decide, okay, well, I was intending to go, like, Arakeen for some combat, but what I'll do is I'll go deliver supplies, and then I'll go research station. It just makes people have these different pathings of they opt to take. You don't have to. Not obligated, but I think that is healthy, and it adds to the dynamism of the game state, and it gives people different choices, and that cannot be a bad thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't have much to add to that. I think that you're right. The way that the contracts play create more interesting game states, and they give players a little bit more to do than the same patterns, basically. So it creates new patterns that are emergent, and I really like that. So yeah, contracts are a big bonus for me. I really like them. I know that when we were over at North Carolina, that's all right. When we were in North Carolina, I know that before North Carolina, we were talking to or Cheeseable was saying that he didn't really like
his
contracts.
old video, his first one.
But he's come around on those, of course. Like he's talked about.
Yeah, he was really not convinced, but no, I think that I mean, it's worth talking to. We'll obviously, like some of the contracts are maybe a little bit iffy value. I guess I'll quickly brief introduction to it. There's been questions of like the Sardaukar contracts because obviously that's ingrained into Carino's abilities. I do think the double card draw Sardaukar contract's not that great, though I think the recall is really strong.
So, well, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe we should save this for a different podcast because
we should do. But it's just while we're on the topic, there's some interesting levels.
The thing I want to say about those contracts, I think that they're variable based on the game state, and that's what makes them interesting. So, like, there's a game I recently played as Shaddam, and had I taken the 2 card draw instead of like an Arakeen contract for water, I would have actually ended up buying a Spice Must Flow instead when I hit Sardaukar. I would have had, like, I probably would have won the game, but I ended up not doing that, and it cost me. So, like, I think that those contracts are really cool, and I think that the decision space for them is also really cool. So, I mean, they're just a big thumbs up for me, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Just a general concept. They're really good for the game. Play with them every single time. Don't get, even if this is the first game of Dune Imperium you have ever played in your life, just put the contracts in. It's a more interesting game. It's far more interesting, again, accept contract and dutiful service. Like, do you want to go dutiful service and just pick up 2 coins? Maybe you do because it's possibly a bit stronger, but it's just kind of boring. Have an interesting game. Play with contracts.
Yeah. So I think we should move on to the Intrigue deck. But what I want to say about it before we begin, and I think we
Intrigue
should
deck.
not Intrigue deck, I'm sorry, the
Imperium
Imperium deck,
deck.
is that I'd like to just do a brief comment on it. I don't want to go deep dive into these cards because I want
No,
to save
we
that for
could do
another
that. We
time.
could do that separately, and I think we should do that.
Yeah. Here's my like long and short of the Imperium deck. I love it. I think that the Imperium deck is a huge improvement over the base game and XMO. I think it's just it does what it's supposed to do very well. The themes are crafted very well through the card interactions. There's a clear theme of specific cards that like lots of cards that that give you 2 influence instead of 1. Actually, quite a few cards that do that, more than in the base game, which is just the power plays. You have, these public spectacles. You have these, what do you call them? Treacherous maneuvers, and these, we've got these cards that just give you 2 bumps, and that's really solid. Like Dangerous Rhetoric has that potential. And then that I think is beneficial to this game because it's hard to come by those influence bumps. I like the cycle of cards that work with spies. I think they're all very good. They're all really fun. All the cards in the game actually that interact with spies, I think, are a notch above most of the others just because spies are so strong. And you know what? The best cards in the game are still like reasonable. I'd say that, the 2 high cost cards, Overthrow and Steersman, both of them are very good.
But it's not overbearing good, is it though? Like we think of like some of the cards we've seen in previous games where it feels like they're obviously very strong and they're expensive. They're gonna be strong, but it's not like it doesn't feel completely overbearing. Like the natural comparison is like Steersman to say Kwisatz Haderach. That's the obvious comparison. And Steersman probably is not as strong, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's just Kwisatz sometimes is a bit much, especially when shipping came into the game. And Kwisatz Haderach is just like it's just so absurdly strong.
It's a step down from that, but it does give you a spacing guild bump when you buy it, which isn't bad at all. So I mean, anything is good with that. The best cards are still good, and I feel like in this game, the cards that you're going to buy on the whole are just better and more exciting than the ones you're going to get in base game. Most of them. Maybe even with the XMO cards. Like I think except for some of the really busted cards for XMO, like these cards all feel really good. As far as like, are there any duds? Like, there are a couple duds. There are a couple. Like, I really don't think Hidden Missive is a very good card, personally. But we'll get into that. And like, Fadakin Still Tent, it's not a very good card. Like, there's some of these that
are all winners. Some of them
they're not
are
all
a bit
winners,
situational, but most of them are fairly solid enough.
Right, but they're still situational in the way that I can see people picking them up in specific cases. And there's some cards that here that are just clear winners. Like you can get like your Maker Keepers or whatever, and your like Long Live Fighters, Interstellar Trade, like these really high cost cards, they're good. Or the ones that print points, like Smuggler's Haven, Corinth City, all of those are good cards
as well. Nasty.
Yeah, but I think that all these cards, like I were saying, like they're costed well, just like the Intrigue deck is costed well. Like I think that's something that they do much better in this one than in Ix and Immo, because you don't have any 2-cost cards that are just outright like clearly the best 2-cost cards in the game.
Yeah,
maybe even the best cards in the game.
In the shadows.
Yeah, I mean, there's none of that. We don't have any Golas to worry about. Like I
was wondering if you're going to bring up Gola.
Well, I like that we don't have those kinds of effects. Like everything feels right, and I think that they're unique effects enough that
if you guys weren't around when Gola first came out in CJ, you were sickened by it.
I was a little annoyed. Yeah. But anyway, I just want to say that I think that this is a huge improvement. I think that we'll get into the nitty gritty of what cards are like best. You can go watch, there's an Orsky video about what he thinks is the most overpowered cards. It's a really good watch. Check that out. But I think on the whole, I'm really pleased with this. I think it's all of these cards are really exciting when they're in the row. Like even the weaker cards, some of the weaker cards like Desert Survival.
I
like
wanted to bring
love
this
that
up.
card. I love
Yeah.
Desert Survival. It's a Fremen and it trashes cards and it's desert. Like that's so good.
Yeah,
Like
there is definitely a an extra bit of weight to like the lower cost cards, like especially from base game. You think of like obviously infantry, especially the scout. Scout still worst card in the game. You know, fight me.
yeah,
You know, whereas in this game, like some of the one cost cards are actually pretty solid. Space time
yeah.
folding, you know, throwing
Space
access
time
as well
folding.
as effectively holo projectors. It's pretty good. Imperial Soldier, like that's kind of low key one of my favorite cards in the game. I really
It's
enjoy
pretty good.
Imperial Soldier, partially
Yep.
because I'm like partial playing as Irulan, and it's like one of her best cards, that sort of thing. Few of things that I've noticed as well from talking about the deck as well. So almost every single card in this deck has some kind of faction tag, apart from like maybe 3 of them. Which does mean that like tribalism in your deck building feels very much more a part of the game. Let's not say that it wasn't, but it feels very much like that's something the game's trying to encourage you to do. You know, go all in on Fremen to get those Fremen bonds. Go all in with like the benches. Orski, bring up Morski. So Orski in that video talked a lot about the Spacing Guild and the potential for Spacing Guild synergy with like obviously stuff like Guild Envoy and discarding cards like say Spacing Guild's Favor and that sort of thing to make spice, that sort of thing. I will say that I do think while he's correct and it can definitely be exceptionally strong, I also think it's the hardest out of the lot to get a decent amount of synergy out of. Like when it's there and it works, it's unbelievably strong. But I don't think it's quite as easy as, like, say, Fremen and Bene Gesserit. I think those two are still fairly straightforward enough to do. You know, Fremen Bond, just get a big reveal going and let that funny stuff. I've had a couple of games where I've done that, like with Northern Watermaster, Unswerving Favor, Shishakli, you know, even ecological station, and just getting that water generation and just have all these cards just
Yeah.
activate each other. And if you can get long live the fight along with that, it's also incredibly, incredibly strong.
Yeah.
So that's definitely very good. Other thing I'll just quickly mention before we finish on this though as well. There's no fold space cards now, so that definitely puts a big premium on faction access, which is definitely that definitely changes the value of cards.
Does.
Prepare the ways being changed is definitely a much needed change. Some liaisons now you feel not so bad for playing those cards, and they can be enablers for you. There are a couple of cards I do think that are a little bit undercosted, and again we'll talk about this more in a future podcast. Strike Fleet, for example, is completely crazy. Public Spectacle, some people call the Weber Power Play, which is pretty good for its cost. It funds itself. Guild Spy as well can just win games potentially, stuff like that. But the one other thing that I want to talk in the future is the fact that obviously now we're in a world of no atomics. And some people aren't happy about that. Some people have gotten used to atomics and kind of like, you know, spin the wheel, make the deal a little bit, and kind of wish there was some kind of way to churn it around because they're scared of like stale markets. I don't even think that's that big of a problem in this game. And I've always been of the opinion that I don't think it's an issue. It's more of a feature than a bug. Like if you play a base game
Mm-hmm.
and the row's got a lot of kind of cheaper stuff that no one wants to buy, well, you play around that and you kind of make the most of what you've got. And if someone decides to open that market up, that's their decision, and then whatever goes from there. That's just my thoughts on it. There's more
Yeah.
details on more of the cards in a particular form, but I'll leave this for the future.
All right, so let's move on to leaders. I think we're going to talk about
Mm-hmm.
leaders. Why don't you start about this one? I've got some things to say, but probably going to be similar to what you have to say. So
Yeah, I've covered a bit of ground here. I did spend some time going through kind of initial thoughts for the leaders. I did my preliminary like tier listing. If you've not seen that, then you should probably go check those out at some link that will probably be featured somewhere around this content, but it's on the Hidden Assets channel. It won't be hard to find. To keep it fairly concise, I think overall I'm pretty happy with the leaders. I think it's refreshing that although the leaders still have like their own kind of obviously their own their little edges and the areas they focus on, it feels way less uneven than what it did. And I think even in base Dune Imperium, like it was fairly clear that a couple of leaders were just kind of better than others. And then once you added in the new leaders and you had X in between expansions, it obviously got very uneven very quickly. To the point where like some leaders in like a more competitive setting are just kind of like almost DOA, which
Yeah.
isn't good. Now we have to remember, obviously, that's a bit that if you're playing sort of friendly and just kind of chilling, then obviously it's a bit of a different story. But you're still going to find that Tessia Vernius is going to be Ariana more often than not, and that's just the way they're designed. That's just kind of what it is. Well, obviously, we don't know very much from a competitive standpoint where things are going to stand from this, but I just feel like there's no picks that are bad. Amber is like the only one that at the moment I think people are a little bit unsure about. And I think that it's a little harder to get use out of her. Jessica as well. She's really cool design, but in a more competitive setting, is it worth the effort compared to someone like Gurney Halleck, for example? Maybe not. Saban is, I think, really strong when he's picked at the right time. If you just pick him every game, he's maybe not that great. He kind of reminds me a bit like a Lasery Kaz in a way. When a Lasery Kaz gets picked on a board that's very beneficial for her, she's very good. But if you just pick her otherwise, she's kind of not that great at all. And Staban is kind of like a bit more of an exaggerated version of that, I think, because obviously there's start by ability. So obviously I go into more details on what they actually do and the things you can do with that. But I just think overall, it feels like the banding between the stronger quote and weaker quote leaders is a lot tighter. I think the only thing I would say though, and a couple other things, Muad'Dib is pretty strong, and he feels kind of a bit mandatory to pick a lot of the time in like position 2. At the moment, we're just doing an open draw. We're not like taking any leaders out, and he feels like you almost obligatory in a way sometimes that he's got to be picked in first and second, because if he does get going, like he can be almost impossible to stop sometimes. You could debate whether his presence, like warping the game state, like we saw in the North Carolina finals, like his presence in that early round changed all the game. You could debate whether that's good or for the game or not. It probably is, but your margin is going to vary. Only other thing I will mention is I fear that after a little while we might be yearning for a few more leaders. Like 9's not a bad amount, but I just feel like, maybe 3 months, 4 months down the line, especially people playing this game a lot, they're gonna kind of wish there was an extra leader or two. And I am aware, I'm sure it's been mentioned, that there's no short-term plans for adding more content Uprising. Medium term, maybe. Whatever they do first, I think they absolutely need to get in some more leaders, whatever they do. And that's the other thing I would say. Like, I think what's here is good, but if they'd have made it 10 or 11 leaders, maybe, I think that would have been nice. But they haven't. 9 is still a decent amount. It's more than you get in base Dune Imperium, but obviously this is a much more complicated product.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you and disagree with you in some ways. I think first of all, I'm gonna agree with you. I think that there are not enough leaders in this game. I think 9 is fine, but I would have been very happy with like 3 more. I'm already getting a little bit wary of some of them, and not in the way that I'm getting bored with them. I just like I think I'd like a little more variety. So I end up playing. I've been playing a lot of the Emperor, Shaddam. I really like the Emperor.
Yeah, he's good.
I really like Irulan. I really think Gurney is maybe too powerful, but
it's because he's so consistent. I think
he's so consistent.
He's so consistent. Like you can never pick Gurney and feel, oh, maybe that was a bad pick. Like his ring is solid. His always smiling ability is very good. They both play into each other. Yeah, like Gurney's just never a bad pick. Like if you're in a situation where you're unsure what leader to pick Gurney, and that
100%.
maybe isn't a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gurney is probably the safe pick most of the time.
That's why I rated him so high in my tier listing. And not necessarily because I think he's the best leader all the time. It's just he's never bad.
I actually agree. And so I also did my tier list, and I had Paul at the top. I've changed a little bit on that. I think that Paul is good. I think he's probably A tier, but I don't think he's better than Gurney anymore. And the reason I don't think that is I think Gurney could do most of the same things that Paul can, but Gurney's extra troop from round 1, I think, is better than Paul's effect of drawing a card overall.
Yeah.
Because I think so. It's interesting, and we'll get into we'll do our strategy talk another time, really, I think. But let me just put it this way: I think that there are play patterns with Gurney that let you bully people out of conflict, so that you win most of the conflicts. And it is, I've done it.
Yeah.
I've been taught how to do this. Actually,
Yeah,
shout out to
I've done it
Badger.
as well. Like it can
Yeah,
get really oppressive on occasion.
he can really wreck, and it's a little bit crazy to see. It doesn't mean it's game breaking really, but it is interesting because a lot of players will think if Gurney's picked, then they can't really plan their turns the same way. They can't guarantee a conflict, and that's dangerous. Um, pardon me.
Yeah, the weird thing
But
is
yeah,
like if Gurney is it's kind of weird one. So we've had before like this came up with like cheesables like Muad'Dib. So it was noted that like say that Ilban and Tesia are like probably a bit too strong in Iximo. Okay, well if that's what you feel, then there was efforts made to like kind of temper that down and like adjust their abilities to make them maybe a fraction sort of not as strong. If you think Gurney's too strong at Uprising, and how do you make him kind of not as strong?
well, I
Because
think
what he does is so simple, but it's so
yeah,
effective. That's kind of the
yeah,
thing, and it promotes, as I talked about in the video, it promotes this kind of hybrid style, which is already really strong. Like hybrid beast, when you go combat, but also you're buying decent cards is really really good, and that's obviously exactly what Gurney is to a T. Is
yeah.
promoting you to play in probably the most optimum way to play it. Whereas with Muad'Dib, obviously like he can also go crazy combat, but Muad'Dib's like you have to go worms with Muad'Dib. Like, if you don't get worms, you're not living off lead the way. It is not going to win you games. Whereas Gurney obviously will want to go combat, but he's not beholden to worms because he can just throw mass
100%.
numbers at people,
Yeah.
and then it's always benefiting him for his persuasion. He's getting decent cards still. Arakeen in his ring is just so good for him. It's absolutely crazy. So that Gurney's got a lot more flexibility for sure.
Arakeen, Haga Basin. I mean, so Haga Basin throws in 7 power if you throw in a worm and 2 troops, but with Gurney, it's in his ring, it's 9, which is pretty insane.
Yeah.
That's 1 off of the double worm, which means that he's just like almost double worming for 1 water.
And even just like his literally, if you've got empty garrison, you got Haggabase in his ring, and you have a dagger in your reveal, that activates always smiling from one visit. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. So the one of the things I'm gonna revise my tier list a little bit down the road, but one of the things I'm gonna note is that Paul, whom I said was the strongest leader because his intrigue draws win you the game. They do sometimes, which is I think kind of nuts. But again, as you mentioned, if you don't get worms with him, he is pretty neutered. Actually, yeah, he's weak.
It's such a big thing, and is that a good thing? Like again, his presence on a table means that everyone has to try to neuter him, because if you don't, you just let him do what he wants, he just absolutely can just crush games, and they're just not even a contest sometimes.
I think it's fine, honestly. I think it's sort of self-balancing in some ways, and he can get really messed up if he doesn't draw access the first round. If say he's in position 2, doesn't draw access, he's going to be out of the game. Like Paul in position 2 without access to a desert or to a Fremen space is not a player in the game.
And it's not like if you don't get, even if you get worms, you win the game. Like you can definitely misplay. Go watch the finals from the North Carolina tournament, and Rob had this situation. He plays Muad'Dib, got Fremen access, won the skirmish, had worm access immediately, but it kind of fell apart on him a little bit. So it's not a guarantee it's going to win for sure, but it's more of a kind of a theoretical kind of concept of, because he's in there, does that mean that everyone else should feel that they've got to absolutely jam Fremen and jam worm space to block him? That has some interesting tactical considerations.
For sure. Another thing about Paul or Muad'Dib is that he's very linear. He's extremely predictable and almost a little bit boring in that way. I'd say he's one of the that's one of the problems I have with him now, and I played him a bunch and I'm like, wow, I'm doing the same play patterns every single game with him, to the point where I'm like, does he do anything else? I'm not sure he does.
Which is weird, because of course you think back to base Dune Imperium, Paul Atreides, he is the jack of all trades. He's the flexible guy. He's the guy that you keep your options open. You try and play very opportunistically. Muad'Dib is the complete opposite of that, and it's really stark the difference. To the point where I'm not even sure if Lead the Way was the right ability for his ring. Like, getting that card draw is nice, but the great thing of Paul Atreides of the card draw is that you knew what you were drawing into. Now it's just an extra card, and it could be kind of anything, really. Just kind of maybe just adds more variance, maybe.
Yeah,
But I don't
yeah.
know. It's a conversation for the future.
It keeps it's weird. It's a variant on the other leader, and it's fine. I think the card draw is fine. Actually, it comes in a lot really handy if you see a big juicy card in the Imperium row,
Or
and he's a
pairing
great
with
pick.
like a spy
Yep.
recall, I suppose.
Yep.
Stuff like that.
So then we have a bunch of other very interesting leaders. I think that generally overall, I'd say that this leader pick is much closer in line with what I'd expect like a base game to look like. There's no barons, unfortunately. There's no one. I mean, maybe Paul is kind of like the baron in this game, where you kind of have to block him, otherwise he can get out of control. But the baron
Really
stalled
weird. You
out.
think about that thematically, right? That's
It is
really
weird. Well,
strange.
it's actually thematically correct if
Yeah, I know.
from the
That's
book's
the thing.
perspective, because I mean the power dynamic does shift in the book and from the third part of the book onward, and that's what makes it so exciting. And also, it's one of the things that that Frank Herbert wanted to emphasize in the book, according to his own admission and interviews and things like that. That power, authority does corrupt. Governments corrupt, things like that. Like, those are interesting thematic aspects. And so, when we go into, I'm excited to watch the second Dune movie, but one of the things that really excites me about how these movies are being put together is how they represent these ideas in Herbert's novels. And then again, I'm also interested in how the game represents these themes in these novels, like, in what way is power and corruption being represented in the cards? And I think there are some really cool cards that hint at that. We've got this dangerous rhetoric, which is a baron on it, but you know what? Like, it's not an emperor card. Or like Paracompass, which isn't a Fremen card. It's like they're kind of more Atreides and Harkonnen cards. Or Overthrow, which is like an image of, I think, supposed to be Paul sitting on the throne.
As that was my assumption, is that's what that was, but I wasn't entirely sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spoiler alert if you've never read the books, but basically that's kind of what happens. He doesn't really, I don't think, literally sit on the throne. I don't think he really does that. But this vision of maybe overthrowing the emperor, maybe it happens in the movie. I don't know how they're going to interpret it, but
screw
like,
you,
those things are cool. Yeah, right. So I love that stuff. And so when I see the leaders and I see how Paul is kind of like worked into this, I really like what they did. I'm not really sure who Amber Matuli is. On the other hand, I've read.
She's
the House series.
She's made up. She's a totally fictional character.
She's not in the books.
Yeah, she's totally fictional. This was confirmed when I went through the leader things. If you watched when Direwolf with Paul and Scott Hudson went through the leaders, and they said, yeah, Amber is completely fictional. They had the permission of the original copywriters to introduce a brand new character in for Uprising, and I believe they've done that also for base game as well as the expansion for Rise of X as well. I believe one of each of those characters are also totally fictional. So yeah, Amber's completely made up.
Which one in base game is fictional?
I actually don't know. I think it might have been Rise of X they mentioned about it, but they mentioned in the video, Scott said, like, if you go back, you'll notice there's actually a couple of fictional characters that we've made as well. But it's all been via permission, obviously, original copyright. But yeah, Amber she's totally brand new.
Interesting.
She's fictional.
Okay. I seem to remember some of them in the lore, but maybe they're barely mentioned or not. But anyway, that's cool. I mean, I like the theme of the leaders. I like Gurney. I mean, Gurney in the books is so awesome. And
Gurney deserves to be a leader. Like, there's no doubt about that.
He does.
Even if he's a bit oppressive, perhaps on occasion. Practice, but that is what it is.
Then we have Irulan. Irulan is an interesting leader, and obviously, I guess this is supposed to hint in more how she's going to feature into the movie, maybe, because she has like barely a part in the books. She shows up. She's later in the second book, but she's like at the end of the first book, and she's giving the epigraphs. Excuse me, not epithets. Epigraphs at the beginning of each chapter, and that's it.
Mm.
You know, she wrote the history of Muad'Dib, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen this represented in some cool homebrew leader versions of Irulan, and I liked those too.
Except she was kind of
She was
busted,
busted, but
but
they were cool.
but it was
Yeah.
still very cool. Yes.
And I like that what they've done here. Like she pulls a 1-cost card, and then she can trash it for spice. Like that's kind of cool.
It's the
So
most interesting ring of the game. There's no question about it. It's a really cool ring. It allows you to be really creative. Like Irulan's probably my favorite leader, and I've got a decent whatever. Even if her side benefits not that, yeah, it's kind of like so be it. Like Chronicles Insight is a really fascinating tool, and is like has many different dimensions to how you decide to use it. It's very important to her. Like if you draw that at the wrong time, that can feel not too great. But I do think
yeah.
she's fun. She's very interesting. But there are a couple of years I don't think are the most interesting. I'm looking at you, Margot. Like
Really?
as I mentioned in my videos on this, like Margot is so simple that you can't really go wrong with her. But at the same time, I
She's powerful.
really struggle using her because she just doesn't interest me personally.
Really interesting. Huh.
I just don't enjoy playing. It kind of reminds. It's a bit like Helena from Base Dune.
Yeah.
I really don't enjoy playing Helena. It just doesn't suit the way I play the game. I do a lot of faction stuff. It doesn't lean into that. And Margot with the spies and it's just a bit too dull for me. I don't enjoy playing as her. I've done it a couple of times. It's fine, but like Margot's just it's a little too much for me on that side. I could play as her and probably do fine, but I find it much more enjoyable to play and interesting. I'd rather play Lady Jessica than Margot Fenrir, even though Jessica's probably worse because she's really awkward and finicky. But at least it's interesting and it makes you have to think what you're doing. Whereas Margot, you're just like putting spies on cities and just hitting cities a lot and getting random
Yeah. I mean,
supplier and just pumping troops in. And you get 2 spies when you go to the Bear Jesuit because you want to spam espionage a lot. And that's kind of what Margot does, you know. And
well, it's the difference between a leader that is functionally relevant to the mechanisms in the game and a leader that is like creative. Like
that's just the way it goes. Like it's not a criticism; it's just an observation. And for me, Margot, like there are, it's like,
yeah.
and again, going back to the Helena thing, like example, like Drazer, for example, plays Helena with absolute bucket tons, really good of her. That's fine because he enjoys that kind of gameplay and he can really get into. I just can't. Like Helena for me just doesn't do it for me, and I'd much rather play someone that kind of suits my interests, and that's fine.
Okay, other leaders we want to talk about. So I guess I talked about, I briefly mentioned Matuli, Amber Matuli. I actually like this leader, even though I don't, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how she fits into the
Amber
lore.
definitely caused a bit of, I wouldn't say commotion when she's first announced, but it very felt like, you know, you look at the 9 leaders and you feel like one of them is not like the rest, and a lot of them did point the finger at Amber. I do think she's better than people reckon, but the problem is getting the value out of her is very table dependent. You know, obviously Desert Scouts is like leading into the general combat limping strategy and like charging people, but that's obviously good if everyone just totally spends all their resources in combat, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Phil Coffers, you know, a ring for a Solari and a Spice is great, except you gotta get that alliance. How soon you're going to get that alliance, you know? What opportunity cost are you giving up for going for that alliance instead of other things, you know? I mean, if Amber can, like, get to, like, say, deliver supplies twice and just start shipping and just bombing that faction, you know, that's a reasonable strategy for her. And I think she kind of is interesting because that's something Shaddam really wants to do. Shaddam wants to get to shipping ASAP and turn his ring into a double bump. It's absolutely devastating. You cannot let him have that. Amber's kind of, like, wants to do a similar thing, but for a different reason. Which is interesting, but it's also not the most interesting. You know, like you can definitely do it as Amber, but there's nothing exciting about. Oh, that's all right. Oh, I'm gonna go shipping this round. It's not exactly instilling a grand deal of excitement to me. So that's the only problem with Amber. Like, you know, it's functionally, yeah, you can do some good stuff, but it's very mid game. Desert Scouts isn't really going to help you very much to start off with. Mid game, you might get some interesting value. Maybe you can mind game some people out of stuff. You know, and Phil Coffers is like, it's there. If you get the alliance, great. But if you don't get it, it's kind of a bit inert. So that is, you know, if you're going to do that, you might as well play as someone else.
So I think that her desert scouting, her ability to retreat, is it 1 or 2? It's one, right? Her ability to retreat 1 unit is interesting and to me, I like the retreating. I like that it's built into a character with the reveal. I've mentioned this in my review. Like, I think she is pretty strong because she gives us Solari. Her ring is very flexible. And I think the cool thing about her is if the game doesn't go early Swordmaster, if players do not rush Swordmaster,
which doesn't always
happen, I think she's better.
Mm.
Because fewer actions mean fewer troops committed to conflict. More likely, you're going to be able to get a cheap third place or a cheap second place.
The problem of that, though, is then you're just completely gambling on conflicts. Like, if you get, like, the Arakeen fight early, or the one that's the Emperor bump, and especially if people start getting worms, Swordmasters are going to just start absolutely flying out, and then all of a sudden you're in some trouble there. So that's I do agree, but, like, if any of those conflicts sort of come out super early, might have a bit of a problem.
Well, I mean, she can play a worm game too, and
there's no reason she can't.
There's no reason she can't. I think she's a kind of character who rewards just solid play. I think she's a character who just, like, your fundamentals need to be very good, and her ring kind of just helps you get some extra resources in a pinch. Rushing an alliance is good. You know, if you can get the Fremen alliance early, that's great. If not, you should try to get an alliance somewhere. I mean, you don't have to. I know a lot of people have said that her ring is much less impactful than, say, Shaddam's, who also gives you a troop or lets you spend Solari to get a bump. Well, I agree. I think Shaddam is just better than Matuli. I think Matuli is kind of down there now with Jessica. I think Jessica and Matuli are probably the weakest two leaders in the game. And
yeah.
then, like, the rest in the middle, and then the top is probably like
Gurney
Shaddam. No, I don't think Shaddam, or I don't think Staban is good.
No, I know you don't. Like, in the right board, he can. On the right board, he can be. But I know what you mean. That's that. You can't go for that. I know what you mean. That's fine.
Yeah, but anyway, he can be good or bad. But but Shaddam, Gurney, Paul, not in that order. But yeah, those are the characters who are more consistent. Even the Paul's not that consistent. It depends, I think. Paul's going to depend on if we do, like, hidden picks with removed leaders, I think. That might change whether he's good or not. I think that
people aren't going to know if he's in the game or not, and that's the thing. Like, now, like, if Muad'Dib gets, like, especially in this 4-1-2-3 that's kind of being experimented at the moment. Yeah, like, if you pick Muad'Dib in first seat, well, second and third, no, you've got Muad'Dib, and it's kind of on their owners to, like, take Gurney or something and like, not let you just boss combats. But if it's hidden and no one knows if you've got one or not, then that makes it a little bit easier for Muad'Dib. I think it probably is beneficial for Muad'Dib if we do hidden picks, I would imagine. Yeah. But that we'll find out in time.
Okay. Well, those are the leaders.
Yeah.
I think they're quite fun. I just wish there were a few more of them. I would be super, super happy with, like, a very small release, like maybe $10 or something for, like, just some leaders. Like, just print some leaders.
I was gonna say, of course, there is a way to get another 14 leaders into this game.
Oh, how do you do that? Tell me.
Oh boy, do we want to talk about this now?
We can talk about it a little bit. I
think we should make mention it. And this is the integration that this game possesses compared to obviously bringing in components and resources and stuff like that from base game, as well as the expansions as well, into Uprising. This is something that you have experimented with more than I have. So I'm a little bit reliant on you for, like, actual experiences as such. I think from my general assessment, though, it's fairly mixed.
Yeah. So I can tell you my experience. I played 2 games now with base game Uprising and Ix. I have not played with Immortality. I've watched a game of Immortality Ix played.
Should probably explain, if you're unaware, in the rulebook towards the back there is a small section. It was released in advance of the rulebook, explaining how you can incorporate previous the version of the game and the expansions, and how to incorporate those into the game. There are certain things that developers say, yep, you can add this in, and there's certain things they say this probably isn't going to work. But there is an image out there. It's in the rulebook. I do go check that. I just want to make a mention of that quickly.
Yes, that's really important. So, yeah, you can integrate these other things into the game. It's kind of like they tested that, and it's a thing you can do. Whether you want to do that or not is up to you. But I did a couple of them, and I think that the Ix one for me, the very first game I played with Ix and Uprising, the shipping player ran away with the game by round 6. I think it was ridiculously fast. I think shipping with Uprising is too strong, but there are possibly ways to self-balance that with change of meta. Obviously, the perception that shipping is strong does change who does what and in what order. I think it takes a lot of pressure off of the worm player, but at the same time, but at the same time, it means that one player is going to be completely left out in the dust. One player is going to get shipping, one player is going to get wormed by round 2, one person is going to get worms by round 3, one person's going to be left with nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's a bad place to be, like 4th position sort of thing.
It's bad. And the main problem with that is that there's no viable alternative as a strategy to power your engine. Like, worms are a good strategy for your engine.
Yeah. Maybe
shipping is a good strategy.
But you can't even jam spacing for the water, because obviously the shipping person's already gone there and they're going to get all the resources.
They're going to get the resources.
That definitely does kind of feel bad.
I mean, it doesn't always work out that way. In the second game I played, it was a little bit different. There were two people fighting over shipping. One of the worm players ended up getting the shipping bump combat that got them into the shipping, which was good because it bounced things out. But then the worm player won because they also got shipping.
Yeah,
so
they
it was
got
a weird
shipping and worms. Yeah, so they got everything.
It was a strange one. I think I did like 3rd place and 2nd place in that one. It was okay, but like the thing about that integration to me is you're trying to import stuff that you loved from old games into this new one. That's why you're doing it, right? Yeah. If you loved shipping, fine. I recommend having fun with it. It's definitely something to try out. If you want to keep doing it, maybe a good meta will develop. Like, my problem is that I think it dilutes competitive play a little too much. I have not tried it with just Immortality, and I don't think I'm going to. I don't like Immortality by itself enough. I've tried base game Dune Imperium and Immortality, and I didn't like it.
I did 1 or 2 games. It was a different experience, but it was all right for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think this is why I won't do it for Uprising, is that the yellow symbol in Uprising is already good. Because it gets you to worms, it gets you to the spice contracts. Like, it does a lot of good things.
Like the thought of like going Hagar Basin to get worms into conflict, and you're doing like experimentations to get water attack, just absolutely completely wacko to me.
Exactly.
I mean, I have to acknowledge, like, I am slightly biased here, and I will acknowledge it here. Like, I personally have absolutely no interest in playing Uprising with either of the previous expansions. I don't care about it. I think they suited the thing that was made for it, being Dune Imperium. While I accept that obviously there is integration available to this, I said about when this first came out, I looked at the sheet for the way to and this might be unfair, and if I apologize, Paul or Scott or whoever, in advance, if this is a little bit unfair. But to me, when I looked at it, I was like, okay, you can do this, but it felt very kind of like conciliatory in a way. Like, it was. I think it is. It's there, but you cannot tell me that Dune Imperium Uprising was built in mind to have Immortality added into it. It just isn't. Dune Uprising is its own thing. There are ways to incorporate these elements into these other things, and if that's something you want to do and experiment with, do so. I would encourage that. But Uprising was not designed with Rise of X in mind. And more importantly, Rise of X was not designed with Uprising in mind. And I think
that's more important. Yeah.
That's what's more important here. Those features work within Dune Imperium because that was the environment it was designed for.
Yeah.
And that's where it should stay for me. I think Uprising as a solid package is totally solid and totally fine, and doesn't need. If there's going to be any tweaking to this, let it be Uprising's own expansion. It doesn't need stuff that was made like 2 years ago for a different product added into this. And it to me, more does not equal better.
Yeah, I think the bottom line for me is that it's a fun thing to do if you have some extra time and your friends want to experiment with some new things. But I'd say, like, Uh, I personally see it also conciliatory. I think it's probably meant to help get people into the base game of Uprising instead of the other way around. So,
There is a very cynical slant that be taken here, and it is kind of cynical here, and it kind of goes maybe slightly into the bit of confusion mentioning the time of this. And that's kind of the idea of like customization. It's something that we're obviously speaking with Paul Dannon, and I do appreciate is that there's been one of those sort of like encouraging people to kind of customize the way they play this game in Uprising specifically. But obviously, to customize the way you play it, you need to have base Dune, Imperium, and/or expansions. And you could be really cynical here and say, is this a subtle way to try and get people to buy this and the base game if you've not bought either of them? I'm not suggesting that is what's going on, but I can see one or two people being really cynical and suggesting that might be a thing. If that's the case, so be it. I do like the idea of the customization. We had a try of Paul Dennon's House Blend, and that's been mentioned on other channels as well, kind of with some light incorporation of previous elements, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but the problem is it then again it kind of dilutes the overall package of what you're trying to do. I think Dune Imperium, if I think in a competition setting, for example, are you going to have a competition for Uprising where you only have Rise of Ix added? You're just not going to do that. It's either Uprising pretty much on its own, or you have like everything in sort of thing. Like this half and half stuff isn't like the most feasible to do in a wider scale. Oh, this is a problem for me. This is not a problem for the wider gameplay at all. Like if you're going down your local store and you'll play Uprising, oh, I bought my Immortality expansion. Want to give it a spin? Sure, let's sit down for a couple hours, give it a spin. And you might enjoy it. That's fine. So this is admittedly a bit of a narrow focus for me, but it's the sort of things I have to think about with competitions and organization
sure.
stuff. So
It's a fair criticism too. I think I think Uprising itself has so many interesting plays, so many interesting decisions and decision points that it will be good enough for competition. I think. It's very interesting.
I agree. I think it as it is, it's fine. It's already kind of like Dune Imperium with a worm expansion, anyways. It kind of feels like to me a little bit, and for me, as I said, more is not better. Maybe down the line, I know there are already people that are looking to try and play Uprising like with Ix and Immo. And we've seen it in chats like in TTS Club, bits and pieces of folks that are trying to like find ways to like integrate like only the experimentation mechanics into Uprising, or only like this little particular feature. But I do think a bit of that is DOA, and it's just like you don't need to. I think Uprising, like if you're playing Uprising and you're not enjoying the experience, I don't think that's going to be improved by bringing in interstellar shipping. You're just not going to enjoy Uprising at the end of the day, sort of thing. It's just not for you. And if you prefer playing Dune Imperium XMO, I would say just play Dune Imperium X and MO. Importing those features into this, agreed, I don't think is going to make a bad experience good, and I don't think it's going to make a good experience great, personally. It's just more mechanics. There's more to juggle. You've got spies, you've got worms, you've got shipping access, you've got experimentations, you've got Imperium Row. You add in all the cards. It's like 160 odd cards if you wanted to do that. Is that a good thing? Do you want a deck that's like bigger than, like 4 people's ham sandwiches? I don't think so.
Probably not. I mean, for me, like we've been playing IRL a lot, and I think that I'm going to probably bring in some cards and make my own Imperium deck and bring in some intrigues and stuff like that.
That's the one thing I think's fine. I think adding in a few select cards from the Imperium row and maybe a few select intrigues, like Paul Denon did with his House Brew, I think that's totally fine, and I think that can actually enhance your experience. There are some cards that are like playing that in North Carolina, and like obviously these Uprising cards, like, oh, there's Gurney Hallux there or something, or not Fufia, for example. Or like I'm playing is that, oh, there's Satellite Band. There's kind of a novelty to it, and I think in moderation, I think that can be a really cool thing, and you should look to do that. But none of that had any of the actual mechanics from the previous things, and I think they are better consigned to what they were designed for.
Yeah. All right, I have a couple of things I wanted to mention. Let's move on. I want to talk about something briefly that no one really talks about, but the starting 10 cards in Uprising is the same starting 10 cards.
I was going to bring this up actually, because it does run into something else, but go on.
Yeah, no worries. So I was actually surprised that there were no changes whatsoever to the initial 10 cards that you get in this game to start your deck. Uh, I was expecting something along the lines of a card that gave you a spy, or something along the lines of, I don't know, a card that rewarded some other play, just some change in general. Because while these base game cards are fine, they've been used a lot. I mean, they're kind of boring, honestly. We've been doing the same thing for
Well,
so
yeah,
long.
it's been
I
what,
was I
three
was
and a half
honest.
years.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was expecting something like alternative starting decks, like
Yeah.
thematic starting decks that came with the specific leaders. Now I know we do get those with the Emperor and Paul for the 6-player version, which we can talk about in a little bit. But for me, I was expecting something entirely different, more asymmetric and balanced towards the individual leaders. Like
Yeah,
that would
I
be, for me, that would have been kind of icing on the cake, but a nice progression toward what I thought this game was doing, in some ways. So I don't know. Maybe it's fine, and maybe I was just a hopeful sort of player here. But we've seen in other deck builders alternate starting cards, and I think that could have been a really neat design direction to go with this. And I think a lot of people would have been super excited for that, even if it brought in a lot of imbalance or goofiness or whatever. It would have been a really fun variant to play with. So I was hoping for that.
I do agree. Funny enough, so I actually speculated that they were going to do this in I think it was the very first Spy Satellites podcast I did. Not Spy Satellites, the first like of the design diaries, or it was like my
Oh yeah,
initial when they first announced it. Like I was one of the people that first like looked into it. I was like, I noticed, oh, some of these cards have got these little signs on the top right. I think these are modified starting cards. And I was right, but we didn't know it was they were going to be integrated for the 6-player game, nothing to do with the 4 players. So
mm-hmm.
maybe there's a bit of unintentional misleading there, and maybe a bit of false expectation that got accidentally raised, perhaps. Maybe you can't necessarily fault people for that. That's kind of what it was. But I do distinctly remember suggesting on the first thing I ever covered for this about the possibility that players might be presented 2 different start decks, and that you get to choose which one of those you want to use. Maybe one that's a little bit more kind of combat-y focused, maybe one that's a bit more resourcey focused, so
That'd be
that you
fun.
can kind of really customize your sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this obviously does lead into the 6-player conversation where that sort of thing does kind of exist, but obviously 6-player is its own kind of universe, and its own sort of beast. But I do agree. I think it would have been very nice, especially with this idea about like customize the way you play, enjoy the content as you want. Well, that would have been a really cool tool to allow that, to give people the opportunity to play with a choice of modified starting decks. And I would actually suggest, I will go on record here and say, I don't think it's impossible if whenever an expansion comes out for this, I think it's very possible that might still happen. Because I think they'll see in
I
the
hope
six
so.
player, and I think people that have sampled the 6-player, I think it's cool that you've got a different starting deck. Maybe there was some potential cost reasons they didn't want to do that, because they're effectively shipping out an extra 4 cards worth of decks worth of cards, which a lot of people might not use. So maybe that's better consigned to an additional content, because then you can choose if you want it or not. But I do agree. I think that would be kind of cool. We've been using these same decks for like 3.5 years. And obviously, like, we've tweaked starting hands before in Immortality, so there is precedent to do this. So I do agree that would have been a nice touch. I think one other thing I want to make a mention of, actually talking about components here, a slight, and it's again going into the 6-player. The 6-player, because you've got the physical copy. All these 6-player components, they're all cardboard, aren't they? For like actually
Yes,
playing,
everything's
yeah.
cardboard. Yeah, it's all
which
cardboard.
which is is a little bit of a shame. I think what it would have been nice to have, and again, it's probably too late for this now. Why couldn't they, instead of having those components be cardboard, maybe just make like the colors for the 5th and 6th players for the commanders, and just make a set of normal components for them, agent cubes and stuff like that. And if you want to give people the chance to customize the way they play, give them 2 extra colors to play with so they can kind of choose whatever color rather than it's always the same 4 colors. Give them a choice to, maybe
Yeah.
they want to play as the dark people because they're gonna the dark people. That sounded absolutely brutal. Like the gray agents because you're gonna play as Fade Ralpha and it feels very kind of thematic, and let people kind of play around that sort of thing. It's not a big deal. But I do
Yeah.
think like it's a bit contrasting. Everything else is this nice wood, like the I actually really like the wooden sandworms. I think I prefer them more to the actual plastics personally. That might not be a popular sentiment among many people, but I actually think I quietly prefer them, and that is just going to be how it is. But yeah, it's just little things like that. I think there could have been if you're going to encourage people to play how they want to, there was a couple of tools here and there that maybe you could have done it, but I understand if they didn't, but it's still bits and pieces here. Anyways, I'm going off topic here a little
That's
bit.
okay. I think at least in the 6-player game, it would have been nice to have different decks for those characters since it's already pretty asymmetric, and it would have been an interesting choice, like which leaders go where. Because I mean, after after you have Paul and the Emperor, and you've played the base 6-player game with like the recommended leaders, they say you can just swap them however you want, and that is actually my preferred way to do it, is with different leaders and that don't thematically make sense but are more interesting for the pairing. So
you've played some 6-player. I haven't.
I have.
You played a bit of it. Tell us your thoughts.
So I really actually like the 6-player a lot. I think the online implementation right now is what is keeping me from playing more of it. It's a little bit fiddly and it's a little long, and it's hard to get 6 people together to play for that long online.
It's a long game as well. Like you think
it's
you
like
can get Dune
3-hour
Imperium
game.
4-player, yeah, like 90 minutes. Yeah, like for 6-player, like it's not like Twilight Imperium levels of length, but in comparison to what we're used to, it's a pretty lengthy stint.
It's also, I think, very interesting how the game presents you with resources and how you have to share resources. I think that's really exciting. I like doing that. I like the way that the leaders give resources. I'm sorry, leaders. I should say commanders, right? Because they're like the commanders of these 2 sides give resources to their, lieutenants or whatever. Yeah, and I think that that's a really fun thing to do. It's really exciting that the Swordmaster is a one-time use effect for each player. So choosing when to use it is a very important strategic choice. I like the new decks for the commanders. Like they are very, very fun to play. Like very fun to play. If you're playing as the Emperor, paying, I think it's Solari to get 5 or 6 like daggers is crazy fun. There's on reveal, like there's some really cool stuff you can do in this game, and I love the way they integrated it. I also think that there's some like imbalances, natural imbalances, that the Emperor can get a lot of money early on, and that the Fremen side in Paul's side can get worms, but the Emperor can't. The only way they can get him is through that one intrigue card, right? The unexpected allies. Like imagining an Emperor with riding a worm or something is pretty hilarious. But like there's stuff like that's really fun. On the whole, I think it's a really, really fun thing to do. And if you get 6 players together, that's a good evening, I think. And it creates a lot of good table talk. There, the one thing I will say though is playing online is kind of a detriment to it, because there's all sorts of things that are distracting, namely people coming into a game and just saying, hi, how's it going, guys? Derails everything, like conversation.
Yeah,
like this is a game that you need to be focused on. Everyone needs to be paying attention. If you're not paying attention, you're actually actively hurting the gameplay, I feel, because it's so long. But that said, like the strategic implications of when you do whatever in the 6-player is very, very fun. I like that the Emperor and Paul start with more points, so they don't have to get as many, but like they can end the game for everybody, and you're like adding up all your points at the end to see who has the most as a team. I think that's really cool. Like I don't have any problems with it. I think it's a good addition. I guess the only sort of knock against it is that, in my opinion, the gameplay of the 6-player game requires a little more fundamental knowledge of Dune Imperium than Uprising by itself or any of the other versions of Dune Imperium. It's kind of like a bonus thing for people who really, really like Dune Imperium and are kind of like up for something different. That's how I feel. That's not a bad thing. It just means that I would not go into this introducing the game to somebody with a 6-player game. I think that's impossible.
Can you imagine that?
I could.
It seems
I shudder.
horrifying.
I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know what I would do. It would be so confusing for them.
How to scar someone for life.
Yeah. The other weird thing, and I'd say is just a little bit unclear how this exactly works in the rulebook, though we've been clarified, and I've read it over and over again, that the Fremen players, the Paul and so on, give everyone hooks when the Emperor, not the Emperor, when Paul gets hooks, all of their allies get hooks at the same time.
Wow.
Both of them, which is it's strange because it's contradictory to the rules as written that, you know, you give a hook to somebody or you give a reward to somebody that wouldn't otherwise be able to get it, because that's what you do. You can't keep those things. Like Paul can't actually use hooks himself. I don't think. Maybe they can, but no, they can. But they get to give the worm to somebody. It's a little weird.
Yeah, it's a bit cumbersome, isn't it? I think that's
messy.
My...
It's messy. Yeah, it's a little messy in rules, and I think that there would have been a better way to do that. Like if you just because if both of them get the hooks at the same time, that's not the same as, you know, one of the players gets the thing. It breaks that rule. So of the leaders agents. So just to clarify, that leaders agents are not normal agents. They're like little cardboard tokens, and they have little arrows pointing to the left or right. And the ones pointing to the left affect the player to your left, and the ones pointing to the right affect the player to your right. So in the game, if you're going to go to hooks, it would appear that you'd be giving the hooks to the player to the left, but as soon as Paul gets the hooks, both of them get them. It's a weird
hook
edge case rule.
Involved.
So just once you know that, knowing that you can't really prevent the Fremen side from getting hooks, or the Atreides side, or whatever you want to call it, then knowing that you have to counter that in a different way is important. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's not an easily grokkable side of the board. You really can't go into it going, I'm going to use, you know, most of what I know from Dune Imperium is like, no, you kind of really have to reprogram yourself and say, all right, I'm just going to go up this Emperor track, get a lot of money, play the long game. Like we're not going to try to contest the worms. We're just going to basically like bully them out of conflict. Like we're going to try to get points strategically that way. We're going to, you know, abuse the Emperor's privilege and get extra actions, things like that. So
yeah,
like those things are really cool and they're fun, but they're really hard to teach, and they're also they're not intuitive because the game doesn't play like any normal Dune Imperium. And I think to its benefit, I think that's what makes it exciting and fun, is that it's different. Play styles are different. And your communication with your teammates is open so that everyone else can hear you do that. It's like, oh, like I'm going to throw in 3 troops. They're like, okay, they're going to throw in 3 troops. Should I play this card that gives me X swords?
I think it's important that that's all above the table.
Yeah. So the table talk is really exciting and fun. I think that after like the hour 2 mark, things get a little bit too heads down with it. And if you're playing this game, like, I would never do it in a tournament, because if you're playing this game to win and not just to have fun, then I think it becomes a little bit, you can almost, what do you call it, quarterback this as the Emperor or as Paul. If you're winning and you're like, okay, well, you just have to play this, and you can kind of quarterback it. And I think that's a little bit of a knock against it too, because it sometimes can seem like that. Especially if you're openly sharing what you have in your hand, though you're not supposed to be doing that. Like that's something that the game prohibits. So you don't do that. So I recommend not sharing hands. Like it's a bad idea. It leads to quarterbacking and it leads to some unfun moments, but just generally, you know, going into it, having fun, table talk, like, you know, putting some worms into conflict, trying to beat the Emperor. That stuff is awesome, and I think it's a really cool addition to this game. I'm glad it is here.
It's a different way to consume your content, isn't it? I think that's
Sure.
the way I kind of look at it. Like if you really enjoy Dune Imperium and you want to try it a little different, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's the same as like epic mode from like base Dune Imperium, but it's kind of the same sort of idea that if you really enjoy it and you want to just try it a little bit differently, well, here's a way to enjoy it differently. My concern, like going to it, is I do feel like the thought of that first game, especially if no one's played a six-player game before, even if you're reasonably well versed with Dune Imperium itself, like that first game could get a bit turgid.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's gonna
agree.
be long.
Yes.
There's a lot going on. It's a bit complicated. You don't quite know what's happening. There's gonna be some rule classic things that you're not too sure about. You're not used to this whole giving resource thing. Like I've got no issue. Like epic mode, I think was fine for what it was because while it was a different way to play the game, it was still kind of the same sort of thing. This is kind of, I don't want to say it seems gimmicky because I think that's a little harsh, but like there's no way that six-player Dune Imperium is going to become the most popular way of playing the game.
I kind of wish it. Yeah, I kind of wish it would because it's a really fun system. It's really fun to play in, and I honestly think that there's some really cool strategic moves you can make in it and with your teammates. Like that ability to trade resources is two-way, so you can give and they can give, but they have to give different resources. Like I love that mechanism. It's a board space that lets you do that. It's just super super fun, and it lets you plan your turns in a really creative way. It's very similar to one of the things we did in Kindly before I knew this existed, but it was pretty sweet. And they didn't actually know about the Canley either, so I asked Paul about that. But yeah, so it's really cool, and I want to play more of the six player. It's hard for me to find 5 other players who want to play Dune Imperium. Honestly, in my group, I think I have 3 other players who like playing Dune Imperium, maybe 4. And I'd have to just like drag
What
someone.
we'll have to do once the online's sorted out, we'll get like me, you, and we'll get Orski, the dream team.
There you go.
He has to be commander, of course. We all know the image, the amazing image he posted. I've still got it as part of my stream setup. It's really super stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's not really like I think the social. I think as well playing in person. I think makes a bigger difference because it's that social aspect of playing the game. I think doing 6-player, but like online, obviously isn't quite the same because you're not in person. You're not there to kind of like. It's a little bit more matter of factly, I guess, in a way. It kind of has to be because like it's hard to communicate because you've only got your voice. You've not got like people communicate with their bodies in all sorts of ways that you don't even realize. And I think part of that in like the 6-player experience is kind of like reading that amongst your allies sometimes, and kind of especially as a commander, So I do think some of that charm might be lost to the 6-player. I mean, there'll be probably a spot I'll give it a spin some when it's not like a particular focus for me, all things being honest, but it's like I'm more interested in doing that than like playing with Interstellar Shipping. So I
Yep.
guess it's a low bar,
Yeah.
but it does need putting out. But that's the only thing. I feel like I get the impression that a lot of people's first game of 6-player might not be the prettiest, and I fear that might ward them off of thinking, oh, do we really want to do this again when 4-player is just pretty solid? That's my only concern. If
Yeah.
you're willing to push through that, then maybe that won't be an issue, but I think that might affect a few people.
What I might do is make a guide to playing your first game of 6-player. I was thinking about that.
That's not a bad show.
Because it's much easier to be told how to play this game, honestly, than to read the rules. Even though the rules are just a couple of pages, they're all over. It's this big page, this like giant like rule book, this couple pages of rules, and you're just like, kind of, where do I go? It feels very disorienting because you have to take into account everything from Uprising and then import your knowledge into this document. And so it just has like setup stuff, and then it's got like how this works, and sort of some of the things are tucked into descriptions underneath them. It's a little bit disorienting, but I think if you just had somebody explain it as you would a normal game, like Teach, this would be easily taught. So
that's fair. I think that's more or less everything. I think
Yep.
I've always covered. I think the only thing I've not really talked much is like the artwork of this game. Stellar job. Just like the previous one, done an amazing job for that. As I told Paul in North Carolina, everyone on that art department needs to have like their salary at least doubled, and I'm hoping that has been implemented. That would be very much good for them. But they've done a stellar hell of a job for that. So I guess as we kind of wrap this up here. I kind of bring you back to the question that I asked at the very start of this. Would you recommend someone get this game instead of base Dune Imperium? Because I do think that's what a lot of this boils down to. If someone doesn't have base game, do they get this? And if they do have base game, do they get this? Because they are two separate questions.
Yeah, so I would say if you loved Dune Imperium and you have it, you should probably get this. I'd say if you are on the fence and you're like, I want to jump into Dune Imperium, but I don't know where to start. First of all, I would try playing the base game.
Maybe Dune Imperium Digital was a good place.
Digital's
to start,
a great way in. If you don't have the money for Dune Imperium Digital, find a friend who has Dune Imperium. I know that lots of local game stores have copies of Dune Imperium for borrow. You can probably like play it on premises mostly, at least in this area they do. Find a friend who has it and try it out. If you liked it but felt it was a little too simplistic, go to Uprising. Uprising has enough going for it that you will be satisfied. For those of you who have been playing online and are looking to buy a physical copy of the game but aren't sure if you want to invest in Dune X Immo or Uprising, I honestly would go with Uprising too, because it seems like it's the most promising, has the best overall production. The excitement's really high. It has good drama moments. Like, Dune Imperium and Ix and Immo always had this kind of gradually raising stakes all the way to the end. Like, things get more and more intense, more and more intense, more and more intense to the last kind of climactic moment, right? But contrastly, Uprising has these micro peaks of climactic moments where you're like, everyone's going in. Oh, okay, we have a downtime. Everyone's going in. There's like 3 or 4 more of those kind of tense moments than in base game. So I think that overall, this feels more like an action movie.
There's a lot of dopamine about, isn't there?
There's a lot more action movie-esque things going on in this one. It feels more fun in a very visceral way. Whereas I think Dune Imperium base game, even Ix and Immo, feels more like a sturdy Euro. And I guess that's the best way to say it. It's a sturdy Euro with a nice gradual climb in the way that the curve of the game goes. And then it feels like maybe like a long-term movie, where this one feels like a bunch of like a movie that's maybe like piloted by or directed by, I don't know, some like action director, so some like crazy action directors like got explosions everywhere and stuff like that. So not to be crazy, but that's some very talented action director who has a good eye for explosions and tension. So that's what I'd say. So if that's what you want, then this is for you.
I as part of getting ready for this, I sampled like some other reviews, written form, video form, that sort of thing. One of which I want to make a mention of was from Dice Tower. With obviously, I make mentions partially because obviously I had Roy from Dice Tower was at the North Carolina event. It was lovely to meet him, lovely, great guy. But I was watching through the Dice Tower review, and there was a point I think that was made by Chris, which I thought was actually very fitting for Uprising. Chrissy. He kind of likened like base Dune Imperium to Uprising, kind of not too dissimilar to Twilight Imperium 3 and then Twilight Imperium 4, and which like fundamentally they're obviously kind of pretty similar, but it's like when the 4th edition came out, it was kind of like almost its own patch of the 3rd game in a way. It tweaked with some bits and pieces, some inner mechanics, but it added obviously a fair amount of new content. It gave everything kind of a fresh coat of paint, just a bit of polish around here, kind of evening out some of the things that didn't quite work in the previous version, adding a couple of extra elements as well. And I do feel that's kind of where I'm at with base game and Uprising. That's not to say that base game is uneven by any stretch of it at all. Well, I do feel there's that's where I'm at here. As I said at the start of this, like if you haven't got any of them, I would probably say, and you're interested in one, just dive into Uprising. I think it's better for you. It's a better pound for pound box. Maybe you might, if you got a chance to try before you buy, do so for sure. But I do think that Uprising is probably the way to go for me.
I agree. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. If you don't like it, that's fine. That's cool. But you watched all the way through to the end, so I hope you did. And we will see you on the next episode of Spy Satellites. Take care.